In November of 1984, recently appointed CEO of Disney Productions Michael Eisner started a new initiative for the company to create high-quality animated shows that would generate revenue through broadcast syndication and merchandise sales. To create these new shows, he opened the Walt Disney Television Animation Division. This was noted by many at the time to be a very risky and even reckless move, because animated series had always had incredibly small budgets, cutting as many corners as possible so the production would be more profitable. Pairing that up with Disney's currently struggling feature animation department that 15 years after Walt's death was still in a period of trying to find their creative voice again without their founder. Had this new venture into the realm of high-budget cartoons produced for television not worked out, it surely would have spelt financial disaster for what was once one of the biggest entertainment companies in the world. This strategic gamble paid off in spades, as through the late 80s and early 90s, Disney would completely corner the market of cartoons, as most of their shows would overnight become household names. This eventually led to the creation of a programming block to house these shows, the iconic Disney Afternoon. In August of 1990, a feature film was released based on one of their most popular series, DuckTales the Movie Treasure of the Lost Lamp, produced by the television department under the new banner of Disney Movie Toons and later Disney Toon Studios, a branch that would soon become infamous in the company's long legacy. The movie was a financial failure, causing an immediate stop to what was already planned to be a series of DuckTales theatrical adventures. Despite this deterring Disney from making any more feature adaptations of their cartoons for a few years, they would eventually try this again 5 years later with a Goofy movie, which was a spin-off of the series Goof Troop set years after the original series. Unlike DuckTales, the film was a modest success, enough to get a straight-to-DVD sequel and cause Disney to continue making films out of their syndicated shows. But by the turn of the millennium, things were a very different story, as we were just coming down from the Disney Renaissance, a decade-long string of critically and financially successful movies by Walt Disney Feature Animation. As a result, their television division was no longer a main priority, and while they would continue turning out high-quality shows, less and less of them would be given any major attention by the company. A few years later, Disney would release their final theatrical movie based on one of their animated shows, 2004's Teacher's Pet. Hiya folks, welcome to the show. My name's the Gladding Gladiator, but you can call me Jake, and it's my mission to infodump about everything Disney animation on the internet. And today we're looking at yet another obscure classic Disney cartoon from the before Phineas and Ferb times. That also happens to represent a very formative experience from my childhood. You see, back in 2012, I was really starting to get into animation as a whole rather than just a few individual pieces of animated media. So I started going out of my way to watch things I'd never heard of before. Basically meaning anything that didn't involve a talking sponge. One day I was scrolling the on-demand section of our TV service provider and came across a Disney animated movie I'd never heard of before called, you guessed it, Teacher's Pet. I was immediately both weirded out and yet strangely intrigued by its art style, which seemed vaguely familiar. So I sat down and watched it, and I absolutely fell in love with it. For whatever reason, I was drawn to this film, watching it every single day for the next few weeks. That's right people, I had a new hyperfixation, and this little film was going to completely consume my life for the next 2 to 3 months. This was actually very important for my development, as this was the first time I had ever become obsessed with a real obscure piece of media. Up to this point in my life, the only thing that had really come close was Oliver and Company, but there was still enough fan fictions and easily affordable toys to keep me satisfied. Teacher's Pet was a completely different story. As far as I can tell, this franchise only had one piece of commercially released merchandise. I think. This plush of the main character is all there is out there, but there were presumably very few of them produced, as in the decade I've been trying to get my hands on one, not a single one has gone up for sale. This was a problem with other Disney shows, as Disney also released 2 plush toys from Recess of the characters Gus and Gretchen. Yet despite Recess being Disney's most popular show at the time and far more successful than Teacher's Pet, those toys are still exceptionally hard to come by. I've only ever seen 2 Gretchen plushes on sale in my lifetime and have yet to own one. But if and when I ever get my hands on all 3 of these, they will be the holy grail of my collection. But when looking up the movie on Google, of course I stumbled across the fact there was a TV series preceding it, so that's still a bunch of content I hadn't seen yet, right? Well, yes, except I couldn't find the episodes anywhere. I never had any issues when it came to finding other Disney shows, yet for whatever reason, this one, all I was able to find were a few very short, low-quality clips on YouTube. So anyway, I bought the movie on DVD, and thankfully it did come with an extra episode, the pilot of the series. And that was all I had. But eventually, with so little content available to me, my interest in the series inevitably started to deteriorate. 8 years down the line, I got Disney Plus, which had the full series, and I did plan to watch it, but by now I'd started making videos and simply never got around to it. So naturally I thought it would be fun making a video on the show, thus giving me a reason to binge watch its 39 episodes. But while starting the research, I stumbled across some very interesting behind the scenes information. This show is meant to be somewhat serialized. Following the pilot, the creators of the show decided they wanted to make a movie with these characters, which would be a huge event the entire show was going to slowly build to over its run. Think Craig Bartlett's original plan for Hey Arnold, the Jungle movie. Except this movie wasn't postponed for over 13 years. So this video will of course be a review of both the series and film, but in many ways it's also sort of an experiment. Because I want to try and figure out what about this film grabbed me so much and see if watching the show beforehand will affect my viewing of the film in any way. So with all that established, we first have to answer the question of what is Teacher's Pet? Teacher's Pet started its short but fruitful life during the dawn of the new millennium on September 9th, 2000, as a half-hour animated series that was first broadcasted as part of Disney's one Saturday morning block that aired on ABC, alongside shows such as Recess, Pepper Ann, and Disney's Doug. One of these things is not like the other. The series follows the lives and various escapades of the Helperman family, which includes Leonard, a 9-year-old kid currently struggling to survive the 4th grade, not being helped by the fact his eccentric mother Mary Lou is his teacher, which often makes him the target of ridicule in the classroom and doesn't help his mission to work up the courage to talk to his crush, Leslie Dunkling, who is the Helperman's next door neighbour. Okay, nothing too out of the ordinary so far. Not an overly original premise, but I could see them getting a nice family dynamic out of this if they really hone in on the relationship between the mother and her son. Oh, did I forget to mention Leonard's talking dog Spot, who one day decided he got sick of being a dog, and so now he puts on a disguise and attends school with Leonard posing as a new student called Scott Ledready II, quickly becoming the smartest kid in class, therefore making the name of this series a double entendre. I'm sorry, what? Plus, did I mention he's voiced by 3-time Tony Award winner Nathan Lane?
First participles, now this. Oh, what a day!
Yeah, he could only be bothered to come back for a few episodes of Timon and Pumbaa, but for this, he's got all the time in the world. The Helpermans also have 2 other pets. Mr. Jolly, a neurotic cat who lives in fear of the world beyond the front door, and their bird Pretty Boy, a mandatory stick-in-the-mud grouch who deep down has a good heart. Outside of that is everyone else at the school. The strict principal who coincidentally hates dogs, the weird kid, the popular kids, the self-centered kids, nothing we haven't really seen before. Yeah, when you take away the whole dog going to school thing, there isn't that much remarkable or even memorable about the show's setup. But there is one thing that stands out from the very beginning, and I'm sure you've all picked up on it by now: the art style. Teacher's Pet was created by the artist Gary Baseman, whose most famous work outside of this show was his job designing the artwork used in the party game Cranium. Baseman's art consists of getting as much personality and character out of simple shapes as possible, and his style is what gives the series most of its personality. But despite how weird and surreal the show looks, is that really enough to carry it through not only 2 seasons and 39 episodes, but an entire theatrical movie as well? Only one way to find out. First, I should mention how this is going to work a little bit different from my previous reviews of shows. Rather than finishing the script and working on the whole video at once, I'm going to write and record as we go along. I'm going to watch an episode, write my thoughts, record the audio, then move on to the next one. Rinse and repeat until we reach the end of the season, then I'll give you my thoughts on the show so far. Also, I'm working on this over the course of 2 months, so if you notice any changes in my appearance throughout the video, that's why. Season 1 of Teacher's Pet ran from September 9th, 2000 to January 13th, 2001, lasting a total of 13 episodes. The series is a 20-minute cartoon. Sort of. Animated shows are typically either formatted as 11-minute episodes or full 22-minute episodes, whereas Teacher's Pet does both. In Season 1, there are 4 episodes which are split into 2 11-minute segments, and the remaining 9 are all half-hour episodes. This isn't really important, but just an incredibly odd aspect of the show. But enough about episode lengths, let's get right into Teacher's Pet. And I guess there's no better place to start than with the show's opening theme song.
Born on the wrong end of the leash, she was a dreamer.
The song is called I Wanna Be a Boy, and is sung by the main cast of the series and someone else who I was unable to find any credit for. The song starts off very simple, with an acoustic guitar accompanying the narrator explaining how Spot has always felt out of place as a dog and one day decides to put on clothes and go to school. Then Nathan Lane and the other characters take over and the energy picks up. And man, I forgot how much this song slaps.
I wanna be a boy. Just being I gotta be a boy. Just gonna be a boy.
But the song also does a good job pretty much introducing us to all our important characters and their dynamics. Leonard just wants to be a normal kid but struggles academically, and his dog is now attending class and is far more academically advanced than him. Plus he also has to deal with the fact his mother is the teacher, causing the other kids to laugh and ridicule him. They even managed to squeeze in the principal's hatred of dogs. It's a very ergonomically effective theme song, showcasing a bunch of fast, colourful visuals and telling you every piece of information you need to know before watching an episode, all while getting you pumped for what wacky shenanigans will ensue from this premise. So the first episode is called Metamorphosis, and fun fact, all the title cards for this show were done by Gary Baseman, which is a really nice touch. After a quite frankly beautiful opening shot, we're quickly introduced to the Helperman family as Leonard, voiced by Sean Fleming, is woken up for school by his mom, Mary Lou, played by Deborah Jo Rupp. Leonard is starting 4th grade, and this year his mom will be his teacher, as she promises not to embarrass him. And already the show is really setting itself apart from other Disney series artistically, with its bouncy and expressive animation as well as its shot layout and cinematography.
This is gonna be the crummiest year ever. Boy, I wish I could stay home like you, Spot.
So Spot, voiced by 3-time Tony Award winner Nathan Lane, fantasizes about what it might be like if he, a dog, were to attend school. But when Leonard re-enters the room, Spot resumes dog mode. Leonard's mother gives him a surprise for his first day at school, a purple bunny backpack, as Leonard says how uncool that is and how all he wants is to fit in.
Okay, well, if it makes you more comfy, just use your old backpack, Doodlebug.
And don't call me Doodlebug!
Oh, right, I meant dude!
Leonard leaves the house as we're introduced to his next door neighbour Leslie Dunklin, played by Mae Whitman, who he has a massive crush on. He tries to talk to her, but she's far more invested in Spot. Leonard puts Spot in the backyard, telling him dogs can't come to school. The dejected Pooch sulks back into the house, wishing he'd been born a kid instead of a dog. Here we meet the final 2 main characters, Mr. Jolly, voiced by David Ogden Stiers, and Pretty Boy, voiced by Jerry Stiller. Then Spot proclaims enough is enough, saying only he gets to decide if he has to be a dog, much to the annoyance of Pretty Boy. So Spot puts on some clothes and decides he's going to school. Mr. Jolly tries to convince him otherwise, but his mind is made up.
Hey, what's up?
Look at that weird kid running on all 4s. Now I've seen everything.
So Spot makes his way to Falla D. Roosevelt Elementary School and is met with his first obstacle.
Oh, no. Not here. Not now.
Leonard interrupts him, only to be weirded out and quickly take his leave. Spot enters through the school and makes his way to class, as already Leonard's day is going so great.
You better not talk. You're gonna get in trouble with your mom.
The kids all notice Spot in the doorway as Mary Lou greets him.
What's your name?
Spot?
Did you say Scott?
Yeah, that's a good boy's name.
So now Scott has to come up with a last name. Quickly looking at a pencil, he says his surname is Ledready II. So he's now part of the class and he is overjoyed.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, guys!
A show as simplistic as this basically lives and dies on its main star, but three-time Tony Award winner Nathan Lane infuses Spot with so much enthusiasm and charisma, making it near impossible to not find him endearing. He sits down at his desk as Leslie compliments him on his purple bunny backpack, much to Leonard's chagrin. Today the class will be starting with math, learning about long division which excites Spot. But the good times are brought to an abrupt end with the arrival of Principal Strickler, played by Wallace Shawn, essentially reprising his role from a Goofy movie. We quickly learn the 3 things you need to know about him. He's mean, had a miserable childhood, and hates dogs. The reason?
Some irresponsible child violated school policy and brought a cute new puppy in for show and tell. And do you know what happened? It bit off half my thumb!
Principal Strickler approaches Spot as his cat Tallulah smells a dog, as once again Leonard accidentally comes to his best friend's rescue, suggesting that she's probably just smelling dog hair from his clothes.
Wash your clothes better, and whatever you do, make sure that dog stays home and never comes to school.
He leaves as we jump ahead to later in the day as the class is now learning about democracy, but no one in the class is able to give a definition.
Well, I know that there is at least one very, very smart boy here who can give us a definition because he learned it at home, right?
This time it's Spot who saves Leonard, giving a very eloquent definition and quick history of democracy, amazing the rest of the class.
Oh, an excellent answer, Scott. You may sit.
And as part of their unit on democracy, they'll be holding an election for class president. As Ian Wasilewski, the kid we saw running on all fours earlier and is played by none other than Rob Paulson, is the first person to volunteer. Mary Lou tries to get Leonard to run, but Spot has already beaten them to it. Spot, in the span of like 2 hours, has become the most popular kid in school, as he impresses the other kids with his athleticism. But while Leonard may not be the most intelligent kid on the block, he isn't totally oblivious.
Big deal. My dog can do the same thing.
So Leonard confronts Spot in the bathroom and it seems he has the whole thing figured out. Well, almost.
You're from the alternative school!
While shaking him, Leonard sees he's wearing Spot's collar. So the truth comes out and he takes it well.
You can talk!
Yes, I can, Leonard.
How long?
The whole time.
And Pretty Boy? Mr. Jolly?
All of us.
Leonard says they can't tell anyone out of fear of worsening his reputation further, and tells Spot he has to go home. But he isn't so eager, uttering his iconic catchphrase for the first time.
You're a dog!
I do not wish to be a dog.
Move over, Kim Possible. Spot tells Leonard not only is he staying in the 4th grade, but tomorrow he'll be president of their class. So Leonard decides the only way to send his dog home is to beat him in the election. That night, the pair are making signs as Mr. Jolly and Pretty Boy berate Spot for his lack of respect for nature. Downstairs, Leonard finishes his speech.
If you elect me, Leonard Helperman, I promise I will be a good president. Politics is not for wimps.
Hey, I'd vote for him. While Leonard's back is turned, Spot tears up his speech and is subsequently kicked out. When the morning of the election arrives, Spot of course gives a rousing speech while Leonard flounders as the pale boy has already accepted defeat. Spot apologizes, trying to explain why he did this.
No hard feelings. Have a grape. See? there are some things only humans should attempt.
The votes are tallied, and the new class president by a single vote is Ian. But Spot and Leonard are both happy when they learn the duties of the role are nothing but chores. The two friends walk home as Leonard tries one last time to talk Spot into staying home. But after some guilt tripping, he finally laments and agrees to let his dog keep attending school. Spot dances about and starts lifting off a bunch of what will undoubtedly be future storylines.
Hey, did you hear I'm going out with the soccer team? Ooh, I hope to be captain. Ooh, oh, oh! And how about a newspaper, huh? If I started one, I could be editor.
Noticing how close to home they are, Spot stashes his clothes behind a tree, thus ending the pilot episode of Teacher's Pet. Now, as I said, this is the only episode of the show that I am familiar with. However, it has been years since I last saw it. The main thing I was surprised by is how current it felt. A lot of the show's humour is built on these long pauses of awkward silence, which serves as a nice change of pace from the manic energy of many other cartoons. There is such a laid-back and easygoing tone that is packed to the brim with charm. Spot is such a well-written and fun protagonist, being hyper-intelligent and a bit of a show-off, but never to a point where he's unlikable. And it's all thanks to the amazing vocal performance by Nathan Lane. The rest of the cast also do a great job, and I'm excited to spend more time with these characters and hopefully get to know more about them as the show progresses. And with that, we move on to episode 2, Pet Project, which takes place shortly after the pilot.
Oh my gosh, Spot, I just had the weirdest dream. You came to school all dressed like a kid, and you were the smartest guy in class and a great athlete, and everybody liked you, but you were my dog, and if anyone ever found out, I'd never live it down.
That wasn't a dream, Leonard. That was last week.
Yeah, already we're starting to see the show attempt to build both a timeline and try asserting some form of continuity. We'll see if this is something that will keep up the deeper we get into the show, or if after a certain point it starts to fizzle out.
What about the part where I had no pants on and I was being chased by a man in a gorilla suit?
All right, that was a dream. Ooh, you're a very complex boy.
Leonard is still worried over the potential consequences if people found out, as Spot tells him he has to stop worrying about what ifs, convincing Leonard of all the good having his best and most loyal friend at school will do for him. And yeah, the animation has definitely taken a step down since the pilot, as is to be expected moving into a full series with a tighter budget, but it's still been able to maintain a lot of the artistry and fluent motion, just with a little less of the bounciness as before. The kids have to write an essay about their pets.
Due Friday, 3 to 5 pages, cultural paper in ink, use cursive, spelling and punctuation count, and don't forget to work in at least 15 words from your Unit 2 vocabulary list.
Now, this obviously creates a bit of a conundrum for Spot, who goes into an existential crisis debating the idea of making up a pet. Meanwhile, the other kids continue teasing Leonard because his mom is the teacher, and because of a speech she gave to the entire class earlier about Spot, they believe she's practically already written Leonard's essay for him. As they leave, he proclaims he doesn't need anyone's help. At home, Leonard is struggling to write while Spot is still stuck on the potential subject of his essay, believing this decision will define what kind of boy he is. Spot gets some fresh air and sees 2 random dogs, thinking perhaps he can write about them. We learn word of Spot's schoolboy antics have already made their way through the streets, and they don't think too kindly of it. Back in the kitchen, Pretty Boy says that he should be the subject of Leonard's essay, as he and Mr. Jolly start arguing over who is the more special pet.
Besides, Lenny boy, don't forget who sings for you, baby!
Oh, he does have a lovely voice.
Spot has already come up with a solution. Leonard writes about Pretty Boy, and he'll write about Mr. Jolly. Both Leonard and Spot get A's on their essay, as Mrs. Helperman announces that she's had a splendid idea. Tomorrow the kids will bring in all their pets for the first annual 4th grade pet parade, where they will read their essays out loud. And the winner will have their essay published in a magazine along with a picture of them and their pet. But as you can guess, this causes an issue for Spot, who of course had to change Mr. Jolly's name to Schrodinger. And when Mary Lou takes note of the similarities, he doubles down and tells her that his is a black cat. Mr. Jolly gets cold feet and backs out.
Oh, darn Spot. You too, darn Spot.
Spot begs him to reconsider, and when that doesn't work, he uses brute force. The next day, Mr. Jolly still can't get over his nerves, and it seems like Leonard and Pretty Boy have this in the bag. Still, Mr. Jolly tries to give it his best shot.
I'm Schrodinger Ledready. I'm not Mr. Jolly. I'm not a scaredy cat. I'm King of the Beasts.
Pretty Boy decides enough is enough and goes to rescue his friend, only for Ian Snake to decide to start eliminating the competition. Mr. Jolly gets over his fear to save Pretty Boy. Next up to read his essay out loud is Leonard, but he can't find Pretty Boy. Because he and Mr. Jolly are outside the school as Pretty Boy walks him home, and this is actually a really sweet and tender moment, which is something I was not expecting to get from this show.
Now, come on. Let's get you home.
Sing for me, Pretty Boy.
Really? You like my singing? You're not just humoring me.
It helps somehow.
Leonard watches from the window as Spot celebrates the fact that because they both left, he can still win by painting a picture with his words alone. Leonard tells him that he deserves to win as Spot has a moment of conscience, quickly taking off his clothes to save Leonard from embarrassment. On the walk home, Leonard again tries to talk Spot into giving up his school life. I'm rather impressed that the show is allowing this to be a continuing conflict rather than just shelving it after the end of the first episode. It makes watching the show much more interesting as this division between them could either get more intense or Leonard could end up slowly coming around. But that's something we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out.
Every day, in every way, I am becoming more and more human. Hey, a squirrel!
Good boy.
Later on, we find the two didn't end up winning, but Spot notices that the end of his nose found its way into the photo, giving him a new career ambition.
I could be a supermodel. Do we have any film in the camera?
Episode 3 is the first episode of the series split into 2 stories, starting with 3A, Moving on Pop. Mary Lou is making Leonard breakfast as today the school has a big exam.
The National Aptitude Scholastic Test Yearly, or NASTY for short.
Later on, the class begins the test as Leonard starts giving me traumatic flashbacks.
Is that dark enough? No, it should be darker. There, that's dark enough. Darn, I made a hole in the paper.
Big surprise, Spot ended up getting the highest mark on the test in the history of the 4th grade, and as a result is being moved up to the 5th grade. Well, this is perfect, right? Spot gets to keep coming to school, and Leonard doesn't have to worry about his class finding out and alienating him even more. It's a win-win. Well, except for this whole his dog now being an entire year of school ahead of him thing.
Hey, aren't you the new 5th grader?
Yes, sir. That I am, sir.
Well, what are you doing out here lollygagging with the little kids? We got work to do, mister!
Things don't go well as Spot isn't used to finding school so challenging. Spot doesn't do so well with mingling either as his new friends start bullying Leonard. And why does this show have such good animation? He tries to apologize, but Leonard feels completely betrayed. So Spot goes to see Mrs. Helperman and tells her how much he's been struggling and how much he misses Leonard.
I want to go through the grades with him by my side, not upside down in a trash can.
What?
That's just a for instance.
He begs her to let him back into the 4th grade and she agrees in yet another quite effective emotional moment. It really caught me off guard just how quickly this show got me invested in these characters and their relationships. So everything is back to normal as the 5th graders attempt to bully Spot only for Leonard to surprisingly scare them off.
And don't bother us anymore!
With this being the first story the show tackled with a much shorter runtime, of course there's going to be some issues with the pacing. Very little time is actually spent showing Spot in class, which leads to his emotional journey feeling underdeveloped. The comedy is also a lot weaker than the previous 2 episodes. Really, that section with Leonard stressing during his test is the only time I laughed during it. However, I do think the genuinely heartwarming ending is just barely enough to save it from being mediocre. Let's see if episode 3B fares a little better with escaping dog trick. While Mary Lou heads next door, she tells Leonard to stay in the yard and keep an eye on Spot. Instead, the dog puts on his clothes so the two of them can get ice cream. But when they get home, Leonard's mother is not pleased. She is in hysterics over the thought of losing Spot. So he quickly changes out of his boy clothes, and he can't deny he does love the attention.
When the doggy-dying detecto collar hits the vortex of lasers, it activates a spray of pungent odors that only animals can smell, driving the victim, doggy, away from the perimeter to it.
Spot begins freaking out because obviously if he can't leave the house, he can't go to school. But Leonard already has a plan to help. He gets Mary Lou to tell him the code for the fence, but only under the stipulation that he must always ask her before turning it off. So now Leonard is in a tough situation, caught between his mother's trust and the freedom of his best friend. Before he can make a choice, he's dragged off by Mary Lou for school, where throughout the day his guilt eats away at him. He feigns an illness so he can go home and free Spot just in time for the history test he'd been so looking forward to. But rather than turning off the fence and breaking his promise, he's figured out a loophole, with his goal now being to free Spot from his collar. Pretty Boy accidentally gives Spot the idea that he should fly over the fence. Despite everyone saying he's lost it, he insists that he isn't crazy.
Not crazy at all! Okay, I can see where the cackling might make you wonder.
Leonard, Mr. Jolly and Pretty Boy lower Spot on the other side of the fence, only for him to immediately get caught. They're about to take Spot away and do Lord knows what to him when Leonard steps in to defend him. Then Mary Lou shows up and upon witnessing this scene tells them she won't be in need of their services anymore, giving Spot back his freedom. This one was very... While its plot suited the 11-minute format more, with it being mostly a series of gags as opposed to any attempts at a deep narrative, it's still clear to me this show works best with its 22-minute episodes, as without that extra runtime to flesh out the characters and tell a compelling story, the whole thing comes off as quite shallow and kind of dull. Thankfully, episode 4 goes back to that with a lick is still a kiss. The episode opens with Mary Lou giving Mr. Jolly a bell to wear around his neck, only for him to quickly be driven mad by the incessant ringing. Leslie shows up at the front door to borrow a cup of milk. Too bad Leonard answered the door in his pajamas. While on their way to school, the two run into Tyler, Taylor and Trevor, voiced by Pamela Adlon. These three clones are the coolest kids in school who Leonard wishes he could be friends with. Spot tells him that he worries too much and strikes up a conversation with them. The boys discuss how shiny Leslie's lips are, because that's what a bunch of 30-year-old men think 4th graders talk about apparently. As Leonard is able to tell them the exact flavour of lip gloss because Spot figured it out earlier. In class, Leslie approaches him in anger, demanding to know why he told people he kissed her. He denies it, but she storms off saying she'll never speak to him again. Later at lunch, Spot tries to cheer him up, saying soon it'll all blow over.
This is, in the words of William Shakespeare, the immortal bard of Avon, much ado about nothing. Cute play, by the way. No Hamlet, tragic prince of Denmark, but then, what is?
Then Principal Strickler appears and drags Leonard through the halls as Mary Lou has a full breakdown. Strickler interrogates Leonard, threatening to expel him and send him to the school for losers. Spot appears and drops some cold hard justice. Through some leaps in logic, Leonard is told the only way to prove his innocence is to pretend he has chapped lips, by showing up to school tomorrow wearing the same pink lemonade lip gloss as Leslie. Already the rumours begin as Spot makes a passionate plea to the student body, which clears Leslie's reputation, but Leonard is still on death row if he and Spot can't find that lip gloss. But Mary Lou doesn't have any, and the store is sold out until 9 AM tomorrow morning. How inconvenient. So they go shopping for the ingredients so they can try and make the lip gloss.
We got your gloss! Oh, wait. Is floor polish toxic? Not to be taken internally. Bye-bye to you.
Leonard accepts his fate of going to the school for losers, which, yes, is a real thing. And we're going to revisit this during the end of season discussion, as so far in this series, I've noticed quite a few ableist undertones, which I really hope don't stick around. Spot realizes the only way to get their hands on pink lemonade lip gloss is to steal it from Leslie.
I'm sneaking up to find a glass to prove a lie I didn't tell, to stop a rumor I didn't start.
And we all live in the house that Jack built.
What?
You should have paid more attention in preschool.
They find it, but Spot gets distracted waxing about Greek philosophers, causing him to fall into Leslie's room right as she enters. With some quick thinking, he throws off his disguise. Meanwhile, Pretty Boy removes Mr. Jolly's bell, ending that entirely pointless subplot. Leslie brings Spot home, and after she's gone, he reveals he grabbed the lip gloss on the way out. And with that, Leonard's name is cleared. And the next day, Leslie shows up at their door and apologizes. I'm rather conflicted on this one. It's easily the most complex narrative the show has attempted so far and does get across a good message about rumors, but then they kind of ruin it through having the main characters have to steal in order to fix everything. Leonard never started the rumor. He didn't do anything wrong, but the show is acting like he needs to learn a lesson. Tyler, Taylor and Trevor are the ones at fault here, yet they are such non-entities that they don't receive any comeuppance. So the message it actually sends is, hey, life's unfair, and the only way to ever succeed is to sink to everyone else's level. Also, the whole school for losers concept makes me extremely uncomfortable, which, again, I'll come back to later. Episode 5 is called Being Mrs. Ledready. Mrs. Helferman says tomorrow class will be dismissed an hour early for parents' night, which only Leonard is happy about, as the one perk about being the teacher's son is he doesn't have to worry about what she'll say to his folks on parents' night, because she is his folks. Until Spot reminds Leonard of all his life problems, as if he does well in school, his classmates hate him, but if he doesn't, he disappoints both his teacher and his mother. On the walk home, Spot tells Leonard the issue that Scott Ledready doesn't have parents, which puts him in a difficult position.
My mom. I wonder where she is. I wonder how she is. I wonder who she is.
Hey, are you about to sing?
I think I am.
Okay, finally! I've been waiting for the show to start incorporating songs. Because the movie is in fact a full musical, so I was wondering if the show would be the same. I mean, you don't get 3-time Tony Award winner Nathan Lane to voice your main character and not have him sing. The song is called Spot's Lament, and is all about him imagining what his lost mother is like and if she ever thinks about him. It's a short song, but has the right amount of humour and despair, and of course Nathan Lane owns the performance. Leslie approaches them and threatens Leonard to make sure his mom only has nice things to say about her tomorrow. His nervousness causes his voice to raise an octave, which gives Spot the idea that Leonard could dress up and pretend to be his mother. Okay, take your bets on how poorly this episode will have aged. Though I do kind of love how the pets all have this inexplicable knowledge of fashion. So later on, Leonard exits the school bathroom and runs into Spot. This is followed by, I kid you not, a minute of absolutely nothing happening.
What are you doing here? The last thing I recall you saying was,
La 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 la, I don't hear you. I'm not doing this.
Well, it's a woman's prerogative to change his mind.
Principal Strickler comes by, and while he quickly sees through Leonard's disguise, thank God, he is attracted to the dog. Sir, please never make that face again. He demands an explanation for Leonard's wardrobe, because this was the year 2000. As always, Spot's quick thinking bails him out.
Why, sir, the young man was just telling me about the marvelous research paper he's doing on gender roles in our society. He's quite a credit to this school.
Oh, yes, he is. Beat it, Leonard.
I don't believe we've met.
Ugh! This man, ew, deserves to be put on several lists. So the parent-teacher conference goes well as Spot and Mary Lou bond over being single parents, which is kind of sweet in a messed up sort of way. But things go very wrong when she invites Mrs. Ledready and Scott over to her house tonight, which he stupidly agrees to, only realizing later that this means he has to be Scott and Mrs. Ledready and himself all at the same time. "You done goofed, boy." So Spot gets Pretty Boy and Mr. Jolly to help him pull this off, and after some bargaining, they agree. First, Spot and Mr. Jolly stage a fight to get Spot kicked out of the house. Then he gets changed and shows up at the front door as Mrs. Ledready. So the entire evening, Spot has to jump back and forth between the three parts, delivering the performance of a lifetime. And despite the fact he's running himself ragged, he does somehow manage. Until Principal Strickler shows up at their door and intrudes on their home because he somehow knew Mrs. Ledready was there. And I don't know how he got that information, but I am 100% sure it wasn't legal. So he invites himself to join them. And because he's Mary Lou's boss, she can't say no.
Well, suppose there's always room for one more.
Well, if you haven't got an extra chair, Mrs. Ledready can always share with me.
Why do old Disney shows have to be like this? Spot realizes this is too much for him to handle as Leonard tells his mom the Ledreadys had to leave. Mrs. Healthman stumbles across Spot on the kitchen floor and sees he's not feeling well. And then she starts to hum to the tune of Spot's Lament.
Hey, how do you know that song?
I'm not sure. I don't remember ever learning it. But every mom I've ever met has known it.
Spot sings a reprise of the song, realizing he does have a mom, Mary Lou.
Good night, boys.
Well, she may not have a tail or whiskers, but I guess in all the ways that count, your mom is my mom, too.
Yeah, I guess she really is.
How did the worst episode so far have such a well-done ending? No matter how dull or mediocre an episode is for a majority of it, they somehow always stick the landing. And thus, despite how uncomfortable a lot of moments are in this one, and how many times I wanted to scream and turn it off, those last 2 minutes made me feel so good that for a moment, I had completely forgotten all of that. Though yeah, I'm never watching this one again. Episode 6A is called Let Sleepover Dogs Lie. School finishes for the weekend, but Ian has an important announcement to make. Today's his birthday, which seems like something you wouldn't wait to announce at the end of the day, but alright, and the entire class is invited over to his house for a sleepover. Everyone quickly comes up with an excuse as Spot is the only one who agrees, even as Leonard tries to get out of it. While packing, they learn this will also be Leonard's first sleepover.
Dear Diary, tonight, Leonard and I will share a very special first in each other's lives. Ah, heck, I'll immortalize it in the morning.
When they get there, it's not at all what they were expecting. There's nothing creepy about the house, and Ian's parents are really nice. And even more surprising, the two of them and Ian have a great time. And if they can turn this into a meaningful story where the two legitimately become friends with him, it could sort of fix my major issue with the show. Before they go to bed, Ian tells them that sometimes spooky stuff goes on in his house. Then turns out the lights and tries to scare them with a costume that is not and was not ever okay. But when Leonard and Spot call his insensitive attempts to scare them lame, he tells them to get out as they have hurt his feelings. They somewhat make up and go to sleep. In the middle of the night, they hear ominous moans as vapors begin appearing from under the door, to which Ian swears he isn't responsible.
We are the voices of the ancient dead. You have disturbed our rest, and now you must pay!
They scream and run in terror, only to find it was a prank by Ian's parents, which they all laugh at. The next morning, Spot and Leonard leave, seeing how much of a good time they had. Ian then reveals he put cockroaches in their pants. Again, we have another 11-minute episode that I think could have worked far better with the show's standard runtime. It was nice seeing Leonard and Spot bonding with Ian, though it's really a matter of if this will be remembered and the two will be much more friendly to Ian from now on, or if the status quo will just reset. Next up is episode 6B, Costume Pity Party, which is the show's first Halloween episode. Halloween, you say?
It's about the candy, it's about the treats. Dressing up like ghosts and ghouls and sheep. It's surely dandy. But brother, when push comes to shove and shove comes to pull, just fill me up until I'm full of those sweets, those sumptuous sweets. No food can compete with a treacly treat. You just can't beat those Halloween sweets.
Proceed. It opens with Spot scaring Leonard awake with a costume and wishing him a happy Halloween, which freaks Leonard out. We learn that last year Leonard was bullied for his costume and as such no longer has the Hallows Eve spirit. And when I say bullied, I mean he was thrown into a thorn bush, and I can tell you from personal experience, that leaves a mark.
I can't stop crying.
Oh, great! Now look what you've done! He's gone and dehydrated himself!
Spot tells Leonard he can't let one bully ruin his fun, only to learn this is no ordinary bully. It's Dutch Colenza, a kid who was apparently in a class all by himself. Still, Spot tells him this year things will be different because Leonard has him.
I will have your back, Home Slice. Boy, it doesn't sound quite right when I say it.
On the way to school, Spot continues trying to convince Leonard to dress up, to no avail. He runs off, only for his costume to get caught on a twig and completely unravel, leaving him exposed. Thankfully though, because it's Halloween, everyone just thinks it's a costume, meaning for the first time ever, Spot can come to school as himself, which is quite heartwarming. But not for long, as soon Mary Lou informs him that after the costume parade, they switch back into their regular clothes. Well, since he didn't know, surely he can't be blamed for saying he simply doesn't have any other clothes with him. But instead, he and Leonard try and make a break for it, only to run into every single member of the school faculty. The two hide in the janitor's closet as Spot says his school days are over and he might as well turn himself in. And I'm just realizing this is the first time the show has had any legitimate stakes, where there is actually a danger of people learning Spot's secret.
Here, take my clothes.
Take your?
Take them. Go back to class and join the party. Stay in school. You deserve it.
So I guess this means Leonard has fully gotten over his reservations and fears about Spot coming to school, which is quite a big moment for his character. Spot puts on Leonard's clothes and heads back to class, only to run into Dutch Colenza, who throws Spot into the thorn bush. And that is Leonard's final straw, as he wraps himself in janitor's supplies and takes a stand against Dutch, realizing how much he loves wearing a costume.
And I don't care if you throw me in a bush. I'm wearing a costume, and I like it. Because I know that it takes more courage to express yourself and do what makes you happy than to hide from a big bully like you.
That's a shockingly good message from a 2000 Disney Toon. I tell you, every once in a while there is a moment of sheer brilliance in this show. Dutch breaks down in tears, revealing his own tragic Halloween backstory, as Leonard and Spot decide to let him trick-or-treat with them. This is a great episode, and was actually quite special, since we are now about halfway through the season, so some of these moments felt quite cathartic and something that had been building since episode 1. Leonard is slowly starting to become a much more dynamic character, as he seems to be the only one capable of long-lasting change, since we've already seen him become progressively braver and more confident in this first stretch of episodes. Episode 7 is called Scott's Honor, and opens with Spot and the other pets being alarmed by Leonard's weird behaviour, as he rushes off without taking Spot for his walk.
Leonard, let's go, honey. You're gonna be late.
I can't find my hatchet.
Well, if you put your hatchet in the same place every time, you wouldn't lose it. Oh, did you look under your length of rope?
Got it. Ready to go.
Oh, I just hope you're not late for the initiation ceremony.
The animals come to the conclusion that this means Leonard is going to become a carny and run away with the circus. Spot changes into Scott and uses his sense of smell to track Leonard down, and then it turns into a weird parody of the Blair Witch Project for some reason.
It's Leonard. A gang of carnies has got their seldom washed hands on him. Oh boy, I'm so scared.
Spot re-enters the world of colour to find that Leonard was simply attending a meeting of the Junior Boy Rangers. And of course, Spot is immediately taken in by the idea as the troop leader, Kaneki, asks him to join, which he of course agrees to. All he has to do is complete the initiation test. Later on, Leonard says that he didn't tell him about the Junior Boy Rangers because he knew he would want to join and that he wouldn't be able to hack it. But this isn't simply Leonard not wanting Spot to do human things. He is at a legitimate disadvantage due to his ability to not see colours as well as humans, which now the black and white stuff from earlier makes sense.
Don't take it so hard. There are a lot of things that you do great.
Yeah, like sniffing other dogs' tails. Pardon me if I don't hire an airplane to ride that in the sky.
Leonard agrees to help Spot in any way he can on the condition Spot doesn't interfere with his preparations for the Junior Boy Ranger Maplewood Little Car Race coming up. Jumping ahead, as Spot only has 10 more objectives to complete before he can join, but Leonard can't spend any more time helping as he has to get ready for the race. Spot bets he can finish his last objectives before Leonard finishes his car. We're treated to a montage of them doing those things played to the Junior Boy Rangers song. Spot's last objective is to do a good deed without asking for a reward, and he decides his good deed will be helping Leonard with his car.
Add a tiny dab of paint to make it look spit-spot. Maybe a nice yellow.
So now Spot has ruined Leonard's car and soon comes to understand his mistake. The next morning, Mr. Jolly and Pretty Boy stumble upon the mess he's made and tell him the big race is this morning. Just then, Leonard enters and is very understanding after Spot apologizes, telling him that everyone has limitations. Pretty Boy reminds them that if they stop talking about their feelings and focus, they can work together to fix the car in time for the race. So Leonard wins the race and Spot becomes a Junior Boy Ranger. Great episode. Episode 8 is called Fifi. We learn the circus is coming to town. Later on, everyone enjoys the wonders of the circus, animal cruelty included. Also, a guy straight up dies. Spot loves the circus, and side note, I really enjoy how caring Mary Lou is to Scott as she brings him to the circus and buys him refreshments. To get into headcanon territory, with Scott and Leonard being best friends, Mary Lou has obviously seen him a lot outside of school, and would likely at some point start suspecting his mother isn't really around all that much. Especially if she overhears him talking about all the childhood stuff he's never gotten to experience before, like going to the circus. So she sort of steps up to become another maternal figure in his life. Like, I fully believe were the opportunity to come up, she would not hesitate to adopt Scott, and I just think that's really wholesome. The clowns arrive and force Leonard to be part of the act, with a little help from Spot of course. Leonard actually turns out to love the spotlight, and is a natural entertainer. But Spot becomes distracted when a dancing poodle named Fifi appears in the ring and he is smitten. After the show, Leonard reveals he now wants to be a clown as Spot waits for Fifi. Once their eyes meet, Fifi, voiced by Broadway queen Bernadette Peters, recognizes Spot is an abnormally smart dog just like her, and the two arrange to meet that night. Back to Leonard, his clown routine needs a little work as Pretty Boy upstages him. Spot is head over heels in love as he starts spouting all the cliches before recognizing he's spouting all the cliches and has such become one. Pretty Boy is trying to warn Spot of the dangers of love while Mr. Jolly does nothing but enable his spontaneous infatuation. Pretty Boy gives us some backstory of how he once fell in love with a goose who soon migrated south.
My advice to you boys, never give your heart to a skite who's been hardwired by Mother Nature to fly to Tierra del Fuego every 6 months.
Mr. Jolly makes him feel better as Spot gets ready for his date and asks Leonard for help. But his Lady and the Tramp date doesn't go to plan as they've apparently asked every Italian restaurant in town. So Spot has another idea. They go to the Korean restaurant run by the family of his classmate Young-hee Mandelbaum, voiced by Lauren Tom. I haven't mentioned her yet because this is the first time she's been relevant in an episode. She's Leslie's best friend and that's pretty much all there is to her at this point. Leonard offers to do his clown routine for them if they help with Spot's date.
No, Leonard, no! You'll kill yourself! It's a bit. Oh, Daddy, please help him so he'll stop doing these scary clown things!
So Spot and Fifi can finally have their romantic dinner date, but they're quickly interrupted as Fifi has to go back because the circus train leaves at 9 in the morning, so she has to go pack her things. She then turns around and says Spot should come with her, as Leonard tries to talk some sense into him but then gets wrapped up in his dreams of clowndom. Leonard takes Spot home as Fifi says to meet her at the train. Spot fakes being asleep and soon as Leonard is unconscious, begins packing.
Good old tennis balls. Ah, and the complete works of William Shakespeare.
Mr. Jolly witnesses this and wakes up Pretty Boy so they can say their goodbyes. But once Spot gets to Leonard, he realizes how insane this all is and that he can't go. The commotion wakes Leonard as Spot tasks him with going to the station to deliver a message, but the train leaves before he can give it to Fifi. Leonard returns home where Spot is waiting.
She
didn't take it well, did she?
She left on that train without saying a word.
Then we learn it was definitely for the best. Okay, episode. I'm not really into the story, but I do like how it is self-aware enough to keep pointing out how dumb this whole thing is, and as always, it is helped out greatly by a few heart-tugging moments. Episode 9A is called Bad to the Bone. The 4th graders on their way back from a trip to the Charles Dickens Museum, which, believe it or not, is a real thing. In London. You know, where it actually makes sense to have something like that. Spot is annoyed that no one has learned anything about the writer, only to become distracted by an open window which he starts moving towards.
Scott, what are you doing?
Both the bus driver and Mary Lou tell him to stop, but he isn't able to hear them, causing him to get a write-up which his classmates tell him will go on his permanent record, which will follow him throughout his entire life. So Spot now thinks his life is over. Leonard tells him the only way to fix this is to show them how good he really is. Spot then takes a few massive leaps in logic.
I'll teach those bums to brand me a bad kid. I'll go back to that school, and I'll be their worst nightmare. Yeah, that's what I'll do, see? If it's bad boy they want, then bad boy they'll get.
So to him, fighting back means not writing in cursive and putting commas in the wrong place. He truly is unhinged. Throughout the day, we see Spot's hilarious attempts at trying to be bad with the song Nobody Does Bad Quite As Good As Me, but he's only actually able to do bad things by accident, which causes him to end up in detention. Once Strickler leaves, Spot calls him a fascist tyrant and then realizes he left his keys behind, meaning he has the instruments of which he will enact sweet retribution. Spot and the other detainees trash Strickler's office, which I see absolutely no problem with this. You go, sweetie. But then Spot actually looks at his permanent record.
Scott Ledready II is a smart and well-behaved boy with no major shortcomings. He needs to learn proper field trip behavior, but in every other aspect, he is a very good boy.
There's nothing bad in my file.
Spot understands his lapse in judgment just as Leonard runs in to stop him. They quickly clean up the mess just in time, as Strickler sends them on their way right before the office caves in on him. Good episode. 9B, Always Knock a Postman Twice, is about Spot making a scene during career day when he insults a mailman because dog. Because of this, he is now being forced to apologise as he explains to Leonard the ancient feud between Mutt and Mail Carrier. And soon it becomes clear that if Spot continues acting like this, it will be his undoing.
Scott certainly was acting exactly like little Spot here. Exactly. Say, wouldn't it be fascinating if somehow a dog could transform himself into a little boy? Well, I am not going to give away my best ideas for science fiction short stories.
Spot takes Leonard to show him the truth, who then turns around and proves to him how unfounded his prejudice is. This ends in Spot damaging private property, getting Leonard in trouble, and having every dog in the neighbourhood chase after the mailman. Leonard reveals that because of career day, he's now decided he wants to be a letter carrier, thus making Spot question everything. He stands up for Leonard, thus causing the other dogs to turn on him. The episode ends with Spot hosting a dog and mailman friendship day in the park in the hopes of ending the prejudice, and it actually works. Pretty decent episode. Episode 10 is titled You Can't Bite City Hall, and opens with Spot having a mental breakdown over not being able to solve a math problem, to which Mary Lou teaches the class how to break down bigger problems to make them easier to solve. We then learn that the city council is debating building a new skate park, and one of the students will get to speak on behalf of the school at the hearing. Through a musical number, Spot convinces the rest of the student body that he's the perfect candidate, only to lose control of his skateboard and crash into the same group of dogs from the previous episode. So they're about to attack until Spot is able to confuse them long enough to escape. Once the confrontation turns less sour, the dogs reveal they're in a bad mood because the dog park is being torn down, which Spot is outraged by.
We must save it for ourselves, for our children, for our children's children.
Oh,
Oh, all right. Well, for the children of those who haven't, visited the vet.
Through a reprise, Spot says since he'll be in City Hall tomorrow, he can save the park. But as fate would have it, the reason the dog park is being torn down is to put up the skate park. Oh, what cruel twist of coincidental and definitely not predictable fate. So now his two lives are in direct opposition with each other, giving him an identity crisis.
If you don't choose a skateboard park, then maybe that means you're not really a kid. And if you're not really a kid, then I'm sorry, but maybe you should just stay home and not go to school.
Wow. Okay. This random turn for Leonard feels antithetical to everything the show has done up to this point, completely regressing Leonard's character and ignoring how much he's changed since the pilot. I get they're trying to add more weight to Spot's decision, but it's overly mean-spirited and really unnecessary. Leonard by this point would know that Spot wouldn't back out of the skate park unless he had a good reason. Anyway, during the night, Spot has a dream, but Leonard wakes him up before he can figure out his choice.
We've got to get you to that city council meeting so you can get us our skateboard park. You are gonna get us a skateboard park, aren't you, Scott?
Seems Leonard's not the only one whose character development has been thrown out the window, as now suddenly Pretty Boy doesn't care about Mr. Jolly's feelings, which all the previous episodes have shown us is flat out not true. Spot begins speaking at City Hall, and it's not going well. He remembers Mary Lou's lesson from the beginning about breaking down larger problems so they're easier to solve, and realizes the solution is simply have both with a joint custody agreement.
On Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, dogs can have the park. From Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, skaters rule till dark. And Saturday night's too great for words.
On Saturday night, explore the birds!
I thank you all for hearing my remarks.
This is a really difficult episode. On one hand, Spot's conflict is the most engaging storyline the show has presented us with so far, and it's very important for his development. But there's also a lot of moments that feel out of character and just some very questionable choices on the part of the writers. But looking at it overall, the good definitely outweighs the rest of it. Well, next up is Season 1, Episode 11, A Dog for All Seasons, our first holiday special. Okay.
Names.
The feelings we have are the same.
Alright, this is the only Christmas thing I've got with me, and it, doesn't work, so... Mary Lou hands out the scripts for the school's Christmas pageant called A Christmassy Christmas in Christmas Town. Sounds festive. Spot is overjoyed to become an actor as Leonard learns he only got one line. When they start reading through the script, one of the kids brings up Hanukkah as Mary Lou says they will incorporate the Jewish holiday into the performance.
Let's turn to page... Yes, Kelsey?
My family celebrates Kwanzaa.
Oh. Well, I'm sure there's room in the play for a sizable Kwanzaa quotient. Okie dokie artichoke. Now, does anybody else's family celebrate something different?
So now the school will be putting on the most inclusive holiday pageant ever, meaning she'll have to write a new script. Big shock, Strickler doesn't like the idea.
This school has a proud history of observing one holiday and ignoring all the others, and I'm not about to change that.
Well, screw you! Mary Lou doesn't take this sitting down, and does get him to agree by meeting some frivolous demands. Spot is bothered by the fact dogs don't have a holiday for themselves, as Leonard tells him that he has traditions at home. Later on in the day, Mary Lou gets all her boys ready to take a Christmas card photo, as Leonard questions if she's simply putting off writing the play.
Afraid? Of some silly play with 19 different holidays in it? That if I don't finish by tomorrow, I'll have ruined Christmas for everyone and I'll probably be fired? I am not afraid at all.
She ought to be.
So Leonard tries to get everyone's help, but Spot has decided to leave and go find his holiday tradition, but doesn't have any luck. Meanwhile, Mary Lou is nearing her breaking point, unable to even come up with a basic idea for the play, causing her usually upbeat attitude to dissolve. She eventually begins to hallucinate, driving her further into madness. Spot has concluded that because he has no holiday, he doesn't belong anywhere, and that maybe he should give up and go back to being a regular dog. Then a magical dog called Tim 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 shows up and says Spot is missing something important. He shows Spot all his past Christmases, causing him to realise the meaning of the season, and so he rushes home and sees what's been going on in his absence. He wakes Leonard and the two spend all night working. The next day, they present Mary Lou and Principal Strickler with a song that celebrates the diversity as well as what the various holidays share. And we flash forward to the pageant where they perform the song called The Season of Love, which is easily the best song featured in the series so far. The pageant is a hit as everyone loves it, and we end the episode by watching Tim 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 get hit by Santa's sleigh. This was a fantastic holiday episode. It was amazing we finally got a storyline focused on Mary Lou that gave her a lot more depth as a character and allowed us to see a different side to her. Spot's emotional journey to find a holiday tradition was also very engaging, if a little cliche, but I mean, this moral is overdone for a reason, because it works. It's the right amount of seasonal episode mixed with the surreal, wholesome chaos of Teacher's Pet to end up with something decently funny and quite touching. So when December comes around again, I do highly recommend checking this episode out. Things I do for content. I'm gonna need a broom. Fun fact, I don't have a broom. Alright, let's keep going. Our 12th and penultimate episode of the season is Tallulah Palooza. Principal Strickler asks Mary Lou to look after Tallulah for the night while he goes to the annual Principals Convention, despite the fact he very much knows at this point that she has a dog. The obvious issue is Tallulah is the only being outside the Helperman family who knows full well that Scott isn't what he says he is. Leonard suggests that they simply hide his Scott stuff and he just be a dog, causing him to miss a laser tag pizza party that he was looking forward to. Spot decides instead to come up with a plan to trick Tallulah so they can sneak away. And I just have to stop right here and say, there is no reason for any of this. Even if Tallulah was able to see Spot turn into Scott, what's she gonna do? She can't tell Strickler anything, and they think she already knows, so what's the point in doing any of this? Upon seeing Tallulah and being brutalized by her, Mr. Jolly falls madly in love. And we're not touching that with a 30-foot pole. The second Strickler is out the door, Tallulah begins causing havoc and enrages Mary Lou.
No! Well, they're only drapes. Brand new custom-made designer drapes that cost 4 months of a teacher's salary.
Tallulah goes after Pretty Boy as Leonard tries to help. For some reason this results in Spot getting kicked out, but it's fine, as this was apparently all part of his plan. Leonard tries to sneak his clothes out, only for Tallulah to block the exit. Leonard explains to Spot how every time Leonard tries to sneak out, she's always there to catch him. In fact, she's watching them right now. Spot tells Leonard to pet him, giving him instructions on how, and then the episode takes a weird turn.
I think I know how to pet a dog, thanks. I've had 3 of them.
You what?
Nothing.
You said something.
No, I didn't.
There were dogs before me?
Maybe.
Well, either there were or there weren't.
I was really little. I barely even remember
Their names?
Lovey Bear and Cuddly Buns.
This turns into a very long and awkward conversation that has nothing to do with anything else in the episode. Mary Lou tells Leonard she won't be able to drive him to the party.
Right now, it's time to serve her fresh Alpine Mountain spring water in a cut crystal dish on an Irish linen doily. Oh dear, it appears her little claws have shredded the linen doilies that were the only things my great-grandparents brought over on the boat from Dublin besides the bedspread, but who cares about that because I've been so busy catering to her I haven't even had the time to make my bed!
Leonard tells Spot they can't go via a game of charades and he is crushed. In the living room, Tallulah is watching Pretty Boy through the cage as...
How can I tell her I love her if I'm afraid even to speak to her? Perhaps if I compose something, a poem. No, too staid, too too artificial.
Okay, fine, I'll talk about it. So in order to tell Tallulah of his feelings, Mr. Jolly thinks about doing a rap. And because I like you guys and rely on you financially, I won't expose you to any of this. Leonard and Mary Lou sit at the kitchen table as he asks why they're doing this all for someone who won't appreciate it. She tells him that sometimes inconvenience is worth it in order to help people. But even she has very dwindling patience with their guest, causing Leonard to make a shocking revelation.
I've never seen you like this. You're like a real person, with feelings and everything.
Okay, so I guess the holiday episode takes place after this. Mary Lou decides to forget the cat for a moment and take Leonard to the mall, saying they'll pick up Scott on the way. Leonard quickly runs outside to give Spot his clothes, but Tallulah is watching and then...
Well. What do we have here? What's the matter, Pooch? Have I got your tongue?
Tallulah says she knows everything. Or so she thinks.
It's true, Tallulah. All this time I've been masquerading as
a happy-go-lucky little dog, when you're nothing more than a scared, sad, forgotten pet in the rain. Just like me.
So Spot is in the clear, as not only does Tallulah not know his secret, she doesn't even know who Scott is. Later on, after a lot of begging, Pretty Boy agrees to go tell Tallulah how Jolly feels. So Leonard and Spot get in the car, but just as they're about to leave, Spot sees Tallulah attacking Pretty Boy, and gets Mary Lou to stop, telling them they have to stay before going in to save his friend. The next morning, Strickler comes to pick up Tallulah as Mr. Jolly makes one final attempt to say what's in his heart, only to faint.
Sorry you never got to talk to her, big guy.
You know, I'm not. In a way, it couldn't be more perfect. Now she'll never be able to reject me and spoil all my dreams.
On his way out, Strickler gives Leonard tickets for 2-3 rounds of laser tag that he won in the Principal's Limbo contest. Great episode. I really love how the moral was shown across both stories. Though Spot giving up the party to save Pretty Boy was definitely where it shined the most. Mary Lou losing her sanity is always a joy to watch, and there was even just a slight bit of character exploration for Tallulah towards the end, who by the way is voiced by Dot One herself, Tress MacNeille. And let's move on to the season finale, starting with episode 13A, Saving Mr. Jolly. We open with Mary Lou desperately searching for Leonard's gym shorts for fear he'll miss the Vipaturi fitness test today, the Vice President's fitness test of the year. And expect some cultural ignorance here, as over in the UK, we didn't have that. Our school fitness days consisted of jumping on trampolines and playing badminton. No ropes attached.
Any luck finding the gym shorts you lost on purpose?
Come on, I didn't lose my shorts on purpose. I must have just misplaced them somewhere.
Found them! They were crammed into a coffee can in the back of the freezer.
The family leaves as Pretty Boy calls Mr. Jolly to come watch TV, but there's no sign of the neurotic cat anywhere. He sees a news story about a cat burglar and comes to the conclusion that Jolly has been burgled. He leaves to go get Leonard and Spot, as we learn Mr. Jolly was merely using the facilities, but now Pretty Boy is gone.
I've got to get help! I've got to get Leonard and Spot. Outside bed!
So Jolly overcomes his fears and leaves the house on his own, which is quite a monumental moment for his character, and again shows how strong the bonds are between all the Helpermans. Pretty Boy meanwhile has made it to school as Tallulah sneaks off when she senses him, causing Strickler to chase after her and leave Mary Lou in charge of the Vipaturi test. Tallulah corners Pretty Boy as they reference their history in the previous episode before he's accidentally saved by Mr. Jolly. Spot of course naturally aces the ropes, but now it's Leonard's turn, as it's revealed what this episode is really about. The episode focuses on Leonard, Pretty Boy and Mr. Jolly overcoming their anxieties and self-imposed limitations. But just as Leonard is about to ring the bell, he sees the two of them and the shock causes him to lose his grip and plummet to the ground. Leonard tells Spot, who thinks he just hit his head too much, as they leave the gym. Pretty Boy and Mr. Jolly bump into each other and they're happy to see the other is safe, only for Tallulah to enter. The two make a run for it, only to end up in Strickler's office, where Pretty Boy is cornered as Mr. Jolly is paralysed by fear.
I am so very, very afraid. No, you're not. You're brave. You fought your fears. You left home and came all the way to this madhouse because you believed you could help me. So help me!
You're right. I am brave.
So Mr. Jolly uses the school mic to get a message to Leonard and Spot.
Would Leonard Helperman and Scott Ledready report to the principal's office? Please.
Immediately!
But at that exact moment, Spot gets a Charlie horse, meaning it's all up to Leonard. He triumphantly finishes the obstacle course and rushes into the office to save Pretty Boy. Mary Lou then runs in to tell him he had the fastest obstacle course time in school history. And we end with Spot in excruciating pain. Fantastic episode! And now we can finally wrap up the season right after episode 13B, Rule of Paw. Leonard got 100% on the latest math test. Not bad for a kid who's treading the fine line.
How'd you do, Scott?
107. But that's just because that extra credit question was so easy. Sorry, Leonard. Guess I just need a challenge that goes beyond simple classroom mathematics.
Spot saves a little girl from getting moved fastered by the 5th graders, then yells at Tyler for not doing his job as safety monitor, saying he'd take the job seriously if he was bestowed with such an honour. Strickler overhears this and makes Spot the new safety monitor. Cut to the next day and already he's doing a great job, before immediately taking it too far. After an unspecified amount of time, later in the class, Spot has prepared a film on safety for the kids about the dangers of the playground. Another random time jump, and we see Spot has transformed the playground, which the kids aren't happy with, as Leonard tries to talk some sense into him. And when that doesn't work, he starts breaking a bunch of rules.
Oh, look at me! I'm jumping onto the monkey bars in the middle! I'm skipping a step!
You fool! You kill us all!
I'm picking up a kickball without bending my knees!
So Spot takes Leonard to student council court, which I don't think is a real thing, but I don't know enough about America's broken education system to say that with complete certainty.
All rise! Student Council Court is now in session! The Honorable Class President, Ian Wasilewski, presiding!
Hey, another cool piece of continuity. That's nice. But of course, Spot has an airtight case, so Ian finds Leonard guilty, guilty, guilty.
I hereby sentence you to be dragged out to the playground by your toes and tied to the monkey bars, where we will then cover you with grape jelly and red ants!
Spot has an issue with how unsafe that punishment is, but Ian has gone mad with power, thus allowing Spot to see the error of his ways.
I wasn't as much of a tyrant as Ian, was I?
Don't look at me. I was just acting like that to teach you a lesson.
So Spot repents for his sins and hangs up his sash, as Leonard welcomes him back to the world of the sane. Decent episode. So those of you that are still here have just witnessed me talking about every single episode from season 1 of Disney's Teacher's Pet by Gary Baseman. And going off the amount of pages in the script, it's safe to say that we are over the hour mark into this little journey of me rediscovering something from my childhood that I've never actually seen before. But before we move on to season 2, I feel now is an appropriate time to take a pause so I can discuss my current feelings on the show and some things I've noticed on this journey so far. When I learned the show would have a somewhat serialized narrative, I assumed that would amount to simply having a bit more continuity than you'd expect from a show like this, and wouldn't go much deeper beyond that. Cue my surprise when I started watching the episodes and I realized this show has freaking story arcs. In season 1, the first 6 or so episodes have a through line of Leonard slowly becoming more and more confident, battling his anxieties and finding his bravery. Alongside this, he also stops trying to talk Spot into going back to being a normal dog, now doing what he can to help his best friend stay in school and live the life he wants, which all culminates in Costume Pity Party. The second arc of the season revolved around Spot and the problems that arise from his double life, seeing how his life as a boy is often limited or impeded by his dogginess. From his near colourblindness to his prejudice against letter carriers, a lot of stories in the back half of the season were about Spot struggling to keep the two parts of his identity separate, as we then saw them collide during You Can't Bite City Hall. And except one issue where the characterization felt misplaced, The show has so far been consistent in continuing to develop its main cast as everyone had their own stuff to deal with. Even Mary Lou, who barely had a presence in the first few episodes, really began to shine later on with episodes like A Dog for All Seasons and Tallulah-Palooza, which really made an effort to flesh her out and give her depth beyond her role in the series as the overzealous teacher/mother. One thing I kept bringing up was my surprise at how strong the writing was when it came to giving the series heart, as the emotional moments kept catching me off guard with just how impactful they were. Even the most mediocre episodes had a very poignant moment, and I think that's a testament to how well these characters have all been written. They feel like a genuine family in a way you didn't really get from many shows at this time, as all the Helpermans constantly show how much they love and care for each other. Even Pretty Boy, who I was sure was going to fall into the trope of the guy who's emotionally closed off and abrasive who keeps his emotions a secret, only for him to turn out to be very subversive in his friendship with Mr. Jolly, which he rarely denies. There's something special about a comedy series that doesn't deride its humour from constant bickering and insults among the main cast. All the characters genuinely like each other, and it just gives the show this warm, wholesome feel. But do you remember back when I was talking about A Lick Is Still a Kiss, and I said I was noticing some really uncomfortable subtext in the show that I'd come back to later? Well, it's later. Teacher's Pet, or at least season 1, despite being about a dog who puts on pants and attends school, has a contempt for anything that isn't quote-unquote normal. In episode 1 and 4 respectively, we're introduced to the ideas of both the alternative school and the school for losers, which I believe to be one in the same. We're first introduced to this concept in the pilot episode, where Leonard accuses Spot of being from the alternative school, something he's very angry about. I think his emotions were stemming from one of Leonard's many deep-rooted insecurities when it comes to his performance in class. While towards the end of the season this aspect of his character gets dropped, perhaps because Spot tutored him off screen, in the beginning he struggled with his schoolwork greatly, giving him constant anxiety. I mean, this is how they introduce him to us in the theme song.
Turns out he's a regular Einstein and Leonard is treading a fine line.
Why can't I be a normal kid like any other?
Treading the fine line is interesting wording to me, as it means having to do something carefully and avoid making a serious mistake. I believe Leonard is terrified of the idea that if he doesn't do better in class, he will be sent to the alternative school, or as Strickler calls it, the school for losers. And in that episode, we see a bus from that institution, where all the students are being loud and obnoxious and have very off-putting designs, playing on stereotypes of neurodivergent children. But those are just two very quick moments relegated to 2 episodes that admittedly I may be looking too deep into. So I guess we should talk about Ian Wasilewski. He has what are viewed as weird interests like reptiles, spits on people whenever he talks, has a tendency to scream things, and eats glue paste. Ian is a social outcast and is written to be as annoying as possible. Now, I am not at all inferring that this is in any way the intent of malice on the creators or writers to demonize neurodivergency, but the way Ian is presented in the show has some negative connotations, especially nowadays. Even the single episode that tries to show him in a more positive light still has to end by reinforcing that he's the weird kid that everyone is right to avoid and deserves to be mocked and ostracized by his peers. I just find it highly questionable that this show with such a unique art style and an outrageous premise seems to actively discourage anything that's too different. I mean, take a look at one of the shows this was airing alongside, Recess. In that series, every kid on the playground had something that made them different and helped them stand out. The Diggers, Swinger Girl, Hustler Kid, Guru Kid, Upside Down Girl. But in that show, the diversity of the school is celebrated instead of ridiculed. Okay, now that we've gotten all that out of the way, we can finally move on and start working our way through Season 2 and the other 26 episodes of the show. Now, the airing of Season 2 was much more along the lines of what you'd expect from a Disney show around this time. horrendously out of order. While I usually try and put them in production order and talk about them like that, discussing this season in airing order is very important because of some stuff I'll get more into later. The season opens with the episode, Never Take Candy from a Kindergartner. So the episode is about the girl from the kindergarten class who we previously met in Rule of Paw, developing a crush on Leonard because he can stack blocks really high, which he uses to manipulate her so he can get free candy as her dad owns the local sweet shop. During this, Spot and Leonard are also battling their shoulder angel and devils until they eventually decide enough is enough.
You're just an evil projection of my shadow side, luring me down the dark path to my worser nature. Get thee behind me, Devil Spot! Be gone! And don't come back! Oh, what a world! Wow, that was easier than you'd think.
Meanwhile, in the B plot, Pretty Boy and Mr. Jolly are getting on each other's nerves with their bad habits, and make a bet to see which of them can go the longest without indulging. Mr. Jolly can't use his scratching post, and Pretty Boy can't peck at his seed bell, and the two go through severe withdrawal symptoms. In the end, their addiction is too much for them. Back to the main stories, Spot tries to help Leonard by breaking things off, only for the girl to immediately transfer her affections towards him.
Your tower's lots bigger than his was.
So after being led down the same dark path as Leonard, they send in Ian, which doesn't work. So Spot has to end things himself, but before he can do that...
I did it! 7 blocks high! 7 blocks? Wow! And he's just a kindergartner.
Good episode. It's surprising to see a Disney show try and handle something as serious as addiction. I initially thought the premise of a kindergartner falling for Leonard and him essentially stringing her along would lead to disaster, but it actually turned out pretty good overall. Plus, there are a few really great jokes.
Yellow? Yes, indeedy do. Alrighty, Rooney.
Doesn't your mom ever just say, okay?
Moving on to Season 2, Episode 2, A Few Good Boys, which sees the return of the Junior Boy Rangers, as today they'll be receiving their assignments for their community service jobs. Leonard has to go work at the retirement home, whereas Spot gets the stray cat shelter. Well, I for one don't see any way this couldn't go swimmingly.
What could be more perfect than spending the day surrounded by feline companionship?
I'll tell you what could be more perfect. Lying on a bed of nails. Walking on broken glass, flying into the sun. No offense.
Why would I be offended?
Pretty Boy and Mr. Jolly make the two bet on which of them can last the longest at their job, because I guess that's all these characters do now. The B plot is about the other pets getting bored with reruns of TV and deciding to explore the wonders of the early 2000s internet.
Today's episode of the Goonie Gopher Show was entertaining, though the animation was choppy and the story predictable.
Oh, and I think you're being a little harsh. It was a very funny show. I was LOLing. And that means laughing out loud in cyberspeak. I speak cyberspeak.
Turns out Spot isn't just working with any cats, he's working with the Problem Group. And by Problem Group, they mean kittens. Meanwhile, Leonard has seemingly acquired a group of new grandparents, much to his dismay. After 2 days, Spot can't take it anymore and quits.
Don't look at it as if you're losing a father figure. Just, well, I guess you are losing a father figure. Say goodbye to Daddy.
Goodbye, Daddy.
You don't make it easy.
So the kittens all follow him home as Spot hides them from Leonard.
All day long, it's TV and cookies. Elderly lawyer, cookies. Senior citizen detective, more cookies.
Oh, I know he did not just diss Jessica Fletcher like that. We learn Leonard says he was sick so he could leave early, only for the residents to show up at his door. So now Spot and Leonard are running around the house trying to hide their shame from the other. Eventually the old people and the cats force the truth out of the pair and they apologize.
But I can't be your mommy. I can't be your anything. I'm not even a boy.
Not a boy?
Didn't you wonder why I've been able to talk to you all this time? It's because I'm really a dog. Okay, I'm a boy.
So the episode ends with Spot and Leonard being honest with each other and pairing up the old people and the kittens. Good episode. Season 2, episode 3 is titled Bad Fur Day. Spot has to write a passionate and persuasive speech for class, and after witnessing Mr. Jolly and Pretty Boy watching a cat beauty pageant, decides his speech should be about the superficiality of the modern world. Then Leonard comes home and is acting awfully suspicious. Spot quickly pieces together that Leonard is embarrassed over a haircut, to which the teasing begins.
Hey, show a little common decency. Obviously, the boy's in a vulnerable place right now, and I say leave him alone.
Thanks, pretty boy. I really appreciate that.
Don't mention it, kiddo. Holy Hannah, who called the Marines?
But Karma's name is Mary Lou, as she then shows up to take Spot to a new dog groomer. Spot fears the mangling he's in for, only for it to turn out to be rather nice. He zones out and begins to fantasize about how good he's going to look for his speech about how looks don't matter. But then...
Where do the kids at school get a load of... In the words of the Marquise de Pompadour, I gavolt! I'm a poodle!
Meanwhile, Jolly has become smitten with a pageant cat he saw on TV and sent her an email, calling back to the fact they learned how to use a computer in the last episode. Spot tries everything, but nothing can flatten his new Pompadourum, and starts to worry this could be the very thing to spell his doom if people realise Scott has the same haircut as Leonard's dog. So Spot asks Leonard a huge favour. It's the next day at school, and why is Ian wearing a spiked helmet from the German military? And why does it have a huge N on the side? Anyway, Leonard's haircut becomes Spot's shield as everyone is too busy mocking his best friend to notice him. And as the insults pile on, Leonard's self-esteem rapidly deflates, causing Spot to feel guilty. So he decides to make his passionate, persuasive speech, in which he reveals his haircut to save Leonard.
You look like my Aunt Mary's poodle, Monique.
Quiet, Creepshow. I work alone. Mental note to self. Check out Ian's Aunt Mary's poodle, Monique.
Mary Lou gives him triple extra credit for his speech.
And bonus points for any of you who can find ways to appreciate someone for looking different, rather than just laughing at them.
Wow, you actually look taller.
Oh, I think it makes you look way cool, man.
I have a new appreciation for the differences that enrich our culture.
And the episode ends with everyone getting the same haircut as Spot. Great episode, easily the best of the season so far. Season 2, episode 4 is The Tale of Telltale Taffy, another Halloween episode. Okay, let's go. Everyone's getting ready for Halloween, as once more, this show remains shockingly relevant.
This whole Halloween thing is a scam, foisted on a gullible public by the Central American sugar barons. It's all right here.
But Leonard is worried there won't be a Halloween if it doesn't stop raining. They hear the wails of a distressed cat coming from the backyard and go to investigate.
See? It's a kitty, just like I said.
Don't invite it in. It might be a vampire, just pretending to be a cat.
You really ought to lay off the supernatural websites.
This is Spooky, voiced by, who else? Tim Curry.
Smashing!
Mr. Jolly is not happy with their new guest, fearing he might be a vampire. The rain stops as Mary Lou sends out Spot and Leonard to go trick-or-treating.
This is gonna be great. My first trick-or-treat. With the big kids.
But you, last season, and they... Okay, well, either this episode isn't canon, or it's overwriting the season 1 Halloween episode. And I vastly prefer the former option, as I for one would like to keep the episode that's the culmination of Leonard's character arc. This isn't The Simpsons. You can't just give your show an overarching narrative while keeping the characters in a year-long time loop. Mary Lou is threatening her position as my favourite character by being one of those parents.
I organized a neighborhood candy-free, no-trick Halloween zone. All the parents on our block have agreed to only hand out healthy trick-or-treat treats, such as dried fruits, canned goods, and of course, the occasional shredded wheat biscuit.
But Mom, no candy on Halloween? That isn't even American.
So Leonard has to promise to stay on the block and not cross the street. So basically he isn't allowed candy. And as we've seen from season 1, Leonard takes promises to his mother very seriously. Thankfully they didn't forget that, so when Spot tries to convince him to cross the street, he's resistant. But his inner voice is too much to handle as he soon gives in. They learn from Tyler, Taylor and Trevor that some houses are giving out beating heart taffy. Spot is initially repulsed until he's given a taste. And we've made it to our first song of the season. It's about the candy, where Spot sings about his love of Halloween sweets in this big band jazz number. As the song reaches its end, the energy and intensity pick up as Leonard and Spot continue to gorge themselves. When the two cross back over, they run into their friends, who lament how awful their Halloween has been. Meanwhile, Mr. Jolly becomes even more convinced that Spooky is a vampire, and Mr. Jolly is too frightened to even register when Spooky straight up asks him out. Well, I guess that would be not so straight up.
I was wondering if you might like to join me later for a midnight bite.
Oh, gee.
Splendid then. It's a date.
Leonard is feeling guilty and wants to confess, so Spot gives him a piece of beating heart taffy. Leonard continues lying through his blue tongue as his mother tells him how proud she is, thus sending the boy into an existential crisis. In the living room, Pretty Boy decides to prove Spooky's not a vampire via the classic reflection test.
See? No reflection, just like I...
Hey. Good evening. Is it time to eat already?
And yes, the show did remember chocolate and dogs aren't a good mix, as Leonard trades Spot the rest of his taffy for his chocolate. Mr. Jolly and Pretty Boy decide to kindly show Spooky the door, just before the clock strikes 12, only for it to turn out he was a vampire. Dun dun dun! Back to Leonard, whose guilty conscience is slowly consuming him, so he considers becoming a missionary. As you do. A bolt of lightning is heard as Mary Lou comes to check on Leonard. And in case you were wondering why the beating heart taffies are that, it was so they could do a reference to the classic horror story The Telltale Heart, in which Mr. Krabs destroys SpongeBob's favourite boots and hides them under the floorboards until the guilt is too much for him to bear. I don't know the original story and I'm too lazy to read it, so that's what we're going with.
Mom, there's something I need to tell you.
What is it, Pumpkin?
She's toying with us.
Well, tonight, when we went trick-or-treating...
Spot's own conscience overcomes him as he lets the candy out the bag a moment before Leonard has a chance to come clean. Mary Lou is of course disappointed, especially when she sees that Spot had all the taffy and says he's sleeping in her room for the night. Leonard and Spot are grounded for a month, and then the characters spout a bunch of PSAs. Yeah, I'm not joking.
Even though we may not agree with all the restrictions our parents place on us, we should understand that they love us and have our best interests in mind.
What I learned is to never let you or anybody else talk me into doing something that I know I shouldn't do.
And we've learned never to take in orders without first checking their references.
Amen to that, brother.
Mary Lou finds Spooky in the rain and brings him inside as the episode ends. Season 2 episode 5 is called Don't Count Your Chickies Before They Hatch. And you'll never be able to guess what this one's about. Spot is excited for the upcoming air show this Saturday, as he's always had an interest in flying machines. But this won't just be any air show. It'll be the final flight of the famous plane the Crusader before it's retired.
Like a lone eagle, it winged its way above this country as Americans battled to free themselves from the economic quagmire of the 1930s. It was admired by the giants in aviation history, Howard Hughes and my heroine, Miss Amelia Earhart herself. Oh, I still have faith they'll find her.
This week, the class will be learning about responsibility, as Spot takes over and starts info dumping about the 32nd President of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt, whose biggest claim to fame is being the 5th cousin to Tarzan's best friend.
Can I continue?
Can I stop you?
Highly unlikely.
And because he has such a great understanding of responsibility, he's chosen to look after some chicken eggs in the school incubator while the janitor is away for the weekend. So they stash the incubator in Leonard's closet so Mary Lou won't find out her dog is actually her most gifted student. Spot wants them to hatch this weekend so he can be in charge of the imprinting.
What's imprinting?
Why, it's how behavior is learned. It happens when brand new babies observe a parent or other role model. Ah, yes, they'll be able to model themselves after me and my positive traits. Not the least of which is responsibility.
The day of the airshow arrives as Spot is torn between his desire and his responsibility. So he relents, passing up the airshow to take care of the eggs. Then Leonard gets the idea to film the show for Spot so he can still see it. And this is nice. So far, a lot of this season has been these two fighting or betting against each other. There has been a significant lack of the cozy found family vibe from season 1, so this is a very welcome change of pace.
Heck, we'll be okay. All we really need is each other and the heat from this super dependable megawatt bulb.
It is taking every bone in my body to resist the urge to make another SpongeBob reference right now. Spot rushes out to fetch a replacement bulb, telling Mr. Jolly and Pretty Boy to keep the eggs warm. And this is actually perfect, as Mr. Jolly's storyline in the episode so far has been about him feeling his life lacks any meaning. And after some out-of-nowhere sexist comment,
and that is woman's work,
Mr. Jolly grows to like his new role, believing that he's found purpose. While rushing to the bulb store, Spot is bombarded by advertisements for the air show. He finally makes it, only to find out they're closed for the air show. But then he finds another store that never closes, even for air shows. Only problem is the store is located across the street from the air show. And hey, I just thought of a new drinking game. Spot decides the quickest way to the store is to cut through the air show, but he has to buy a ticket to get in. Then he learns there's a raffle where the grand prize is one of the kids getting to be a passenger on the final flight of the Crusader. So Spot has to choose between fetching the bulb and the chance to achieve his dream. One of his many dreams. Still, he remains strong in his commitment to the eggs, until he comes face to face with the Crusader. Leonard runs into Spot just as they announce the winner of the raffle, and big surprise, Spot wins. But soon his conscience starts to take over. Meanwhile, Mr. Jolly realizes the babies will need feeding when they hatch, so they go to get milk from the fridge, accidentally breaking a carton of eggs. Spot bails on the flight, fearing for the lives of the chicks. He tries to give his ticket to Leonard, who immediately gives it as well as the video camera to Ian, so he'll be able to help. Spot and Leonard rush home as they see the broken eggs on the kitchen floor and lament the loss.
What tragedy have I wrought? You all had such promise. You might have been the first female president, and you might have followed in the wake of that famed French oceanographer, Jacques Cousteau. And you, perhaps a song and dance man, the likes of which Broadway has never seen.
Pretty Boy fetches them as they rush into the closet just in time for the real eggs to hatch. However, Spot's too late for the imprinting as the chicks are already acting like cats, which is really gonna mess them up psychologically down the road. This episode was fantastic. Definitely the most engaging storyline since You Can't Bite City Hall and A Dog for All Seasons. It doesn't do anything overly special, but it's a very well constructed story with a variety of great jokes and engaging conflicts for all the characters. Season 2 Episode 6 feature our first two 11-minute segments of the season, starting with Episode 6A, Strickler's Pet. We open in the assembly hall.
I have an inordinately exciting announcement for you all today.
Are they closing the school because of an asbestos scare?
No, better than that.
Actually, it's National Reading is Good for You month, and if the school reads 2,000 books and writes essays on each of them, they get some new playground equipment and Strickler will have to shave his head and dye it purple. But of course he doesn't believe they'll ever do it, until Spot stands up. This sends Strickler into a panicked frenzy. He decides to make Spot his junior deputy vice principal in charge of reading and reporting motivational affairs. Of course, this responsibility is meant to distract Spot so he won't be able to read and report on as many books by overloading him with busy work. The next day, the kids have all read and wrote about 3 books, but Spot has only done 1.
I was up all night building the thermometer. I only had time to read 1 book.
How to build a giant thermometer.
The month flies by as the kids are reading and writing like there's no tomorrow while Spot is preoccupied with Strickler's various tasks. The kids have reached 1,500 with only 4 days left as all their enthusiasm has pretty much been zapped. The next day, the kids pull Vice Principal Spotler aside to talk some sense into him, telling him why Strickler really gave him the job. But he doesn't believe them. Until he does. Spot confronts him and Strickler tearfully admits his deception. Spot gives him a motivational speech about redemption before leaving to go read. All he has to do is write about 287 books in 1 night, and with the help of his family, he gets through it no problem. Only for it to turn out he's 1 short, and there's only 20 seconds left on the clock.
There's no way we can come up with another book report by then.
Yes, we can!
Copy! You did it! You searched your soul.
So Strickler redeems himself by putting in the last report, but then flees when the kids try to get him to live up to his end of the deal. Pretty good episode, which honestly kind of redeemed Strickler for me. Well, as redeemed as a sexual harasser holiday elitist can be. Episode 6B is Fresh and Frozy Chocolatino. The family are watching TV when Mary Lou tells Leonard the new Slicker Edge catalogue has arrived. He flips through and sees the scooter of his dreams, the Steel Saber. Leonard asks Mary Lou to get it for him, as his mother says it would be more meaningful if he earned the money himself, and makes the suggestion of opening a lemonade stand like she did when she was 10 and wanted a,
If I don't get a little Miss Big Girl Mommy's Helper cookie baker oven, I'll never grow up to be a responsible and loving wife and mother. At least, that's what the commercial says.
Still, Leonard and Spot are stoked about the idea, thinking it'll be easy.
The elegance of its simplicity makes one wonder why no one ever thought of it before.
Lemonade, come and get your lemonade!
Scooter bus.
So sour your lips will sting!
We've got pulp!
Leonard gives up, saying he's going to drown his sorrows in chocolate milk, giving Spot a brilliant idea. And in case you can't tell, this is the first episode in which Spot isn't voiced by 3-time Tony Award winner Nathan Lane, as around this time he had his hands full as the lead in the Broadway smash hit The Producers, along with his Lion King co-star Matthew Broderick. The show that would nab Lane his second Tony win premiered in April of 2001, when season 2 of Teacher's Pet was likely deep into production, so he wasn't always around to voice Spot. Instead, they got Kevin Dodd-Sean, who is Lane's voice double, having played Timon whenever Nathan was unavailable. This actually isn't the first time he's voiced Spot in an episode. We previously heard him briefly perform the character in The Tale of Telltale Taffy, where despite Nathan Lane voicing Spot for most of the episode, he did the singing voice during the song. And while it's a great performance, some people have a certain quality to their voice that simply can't be imitated.
Mother of invention, thy name is Leonard.
So in the kitchen, Spot creates a new concoction, the Fresh and Frozy Chocolatino. Leslie takes a sip and becomes obsessed, telling the other kids about the beverage. Soon enough, business is booming, but then they quickly run out of all ingredients except ice. Leonard wants to close the stand so they can leave to buy more, but Spot shoots down the idea, instead deciding to simply serve what they have and double the price, marketing it as a healthy alternative to the Chocolatino. But soon the people catch wise and want their money back. The two are left with no money and a ruined reputation.
If only there were some way to regain their trust.
Wait a minute. Light bulb!
Oh no, not another light bulb!
Yes, and this one's twice as incandescent, wattage-laden, and energy efficient as the last one.
So the two begin baking cookies using the original Little Miss Big Girl Mommy's Helper cookie baker oven, which they give away for free, as Spot has learned the entrepreneurial spirit isn't about making a quick buck, but instead about building trust with consumers through a quality product. Yeah, keep telling yourself that, buddy. Season 2 episode 7 is titled The Grass Seed is Always Greener. Spot, Leonard and Mr. Jolly are watching TV when Pretty Boy enters in an even more bad mood than usual. This is because he has pre-migration syndrome, despite him denying this. As much as he attempts to ignore it, the outside world keeps calling to him. And I have a feeling Baseman had a larger hand in this one than usual, because this is surreal even for this show. I believe the scientific term is absolutely bonkers. Leonard questions why this happens every year, as Spot tells him animals must obey their biological urges. While they're all planning on how to keep him contained until this passes, they fail to notice the open window as Pretty Boy flies off.
Oh, my poor deluded little amigo, the things he could smash into. Ow! A freshly cleaned plate glass window could snap your tiny hollow neck just like that. Smack! Into the grill of some speeding SUV with its careless, cell phone yakking, bottled water drinking driver.
What say we just flip on the TV?
It's the predators. Oh, my soul. Owls and hawks. Alley cats who leap out of trash cans.
Mr. Jolly vows not to eat until they bring Pretty Boy home. So the two go out searching but can't stop arguing over who's wasting more time. Meanwhile, Pretty Boy isn't used to flying so much and decides to take a rest on some power lines. A feather falls on Leonard and Spot as they chase after him, where they crash into a wall and almost get hit by a car. Spot decides they try a different approach as they make Leonard's pinky look like a worm, which works a little too well.
We've been looking for you everywhere. Mr. Jolly won't eat until you come home.
But he loves his food.
He loves his friend more.
So Pretty Boy takes off again as Spot says they should start thinking about what he wants, and they say their farewell. Mary Lou meanwhile has begun trying to tempt Mr. Jolly, who almost breaks his promise, especially after he starts hallucinating from the hunger. Spot and Leonard return home and deliver the bad news. By this point, Pretty Boy has had enough freedom and misses home, especially when he starts being stalked by predators.
Are you kidding? You made me leave my warm, safe, loving dopey home for this? I hereby resign from the natural order of wildlife. I'm out of here!
He barely makes it back in one piece as everything is back to normal. Good episode. Season 2, Episode 8, No Substitutions Please, opens with Spot getting Leonard ready for another day of school, only to find Mary Lou is ill. She decides to call in for a substitute teacher. Leonard is overjoyed, but Spot isn't as thrilled by the news.
A stranger sitting at Mrs. Helperman's desk? Writing on Mrs. Helperman's blackboard? Pawing her lesson plan? I don't like the sound of this.
Spot wants to stay by his mom's side and nurse her back to health, but can't miss school because that would ruin his perfect attendance record. Even though we've already seen him miss a day of school in episode 3B, Escaping Dog Trick. And in case you can't tell, the show's focus on continuity is quickly becoming weaker and weaker over time. On the walk to school, Leonard celebrates how for today he won't be the teacher's son and can just be a normal kid like any other. When Ian tells them they're having a substitute, he says that means they spend all day pulling pranks instead of learning, which Spot is intrigued by. We then meet the substitute, Miss Deweygood.
Do I smell adventure?
Played by famous voice actress Grey Delisle Griffin, as Spot is immediately distrustful of her and almost blows his cover. He tries to do some damage control by ignoring his canine instincts, but starts to get frustrated when Miss Deweygood isn't teaching the class exactly like Mary Lou would, and the pranks start with a 12 o'clock book drop. While Spot finds it fun, he still takes a stand against the insult to academia.
Thank you for your kind words, Todd, but please return to your seat.
Spot gets more and more frustrated with Miss Deweygood and her refusal to acknowledge him as the model student, while Kelsey has put frogs in her desk. And it's clear Spot is becoming more comfortable with pranking their substitute. And the final straw is when she yells at him for being a show-off and starts seeing Leonard as the star pupil. So now he's going to pull a prank of his own. The B-plot is about Mr. Jolly failing to make Mary Lou better despite doing everything Spot told him to, until he realises that he can't copy someone else and has to be himself, and only then does he actually start to help. Spot's pranks go well, but as he's setting up the big finish, Miss Deweygood
Saving Earth is my destiny.
calls him into the hall. When they leave, the other kids tease Leonard for being a goody-goody.
What do you mean? You love it when Scott acts this way.
Yeah, but it works on him.
On you, it's just sorta icky. You mean you like me better when I'm just plain old Leonard blend into the background helperman?
Yes!
I'm cool with that.
In the hall, Miss Deweygood
And that's how you do it!
said she just wanted to be like Mrs. Helperman because she has such a great reputation.
Oh, never mind. I suppose a little boy like you wouldn't understand about pretending to be something you're not.
Au contraire, I understand completely. The important thing is to be comfortable with who you are, be it teacher or a boy or, say, just for argument's sake, dog boy.
Spot apologises and saves her from his final prank. Later they return home as Mary Lou is all better now, but Mr. Jolly isn't feeling too well as Spot offers to be his medicine pet.
You would be my medicine pet?
Hey, there's no substitute for the real thing.
Great episode. Season 2 episode 9 is called Don't It Make My Brown Eyes Green. Leonard is getting bored of playing fetch with Spot, saying it's just the same thing over and over. So Spot opens his eyes to the wonders of the game, and Leonard enjoys it so much he introduces it to the playground with a bunch of new rules and additions. And pretty much instantly all the kids are hooked on this new game called Fetch It Ball. And when Spot sees all the attention Leonard is getting for what he thinks is his idea, he can't help but feel a twinge of jealousy. Leonard argues that since he turned it into a team sport and added a bunch of new rules, that makes it truly his idea. And honestly, I can't poke any holes in that logic. He took the very basic game of fetch and added points, teams, and actual strategy. In all sense of the word, he came up with this version of the game. So jealous Spot decides to get back at him, he'll make a game that's even more fun. But coming up with an exciting and completely original game is harder than he thought. Mr. Jolly's suggestion is just another slight variation of fetch, and Pretty Boys is a little too aerodynamically advanced for the 4th grade. After moping around the house for a bit, Spot's about ready to give up.
I guess I'll just have to... Hey! Wow! And aha! That's it! Why didn't I think of it before?
But his new game doesn't go down well with his beta tester. Pretty Boy tells Spot he has to go help the 4th grade who challenged the 5th grade to a fetch it ball game and are currently getting decimated. But Spot will only help if Leonard tells everyone the game was his idea. But after a quick scolding from his conscience, he stops Leonard, reaffirming to everyone that he was the one who invented the game.
Which I never would have thought of if my best friend Scott hadn't actually fetched the first fetch it ball in the first place. So really, your applause and almost all of the credit should go to him.
It was my best friend, Leonard, who turned it into the sport you so love. So let's hear it for him!
Yeah! So following the most adorable argument ever, they play ball and pretty soon have the 5th graders on the ropes, winning by 1 point. The next morning, Leonard and Spot are ready for another fetch it ball day, only to see everyone playing something else.
Hi, Scott. Hi, Leonard. Come play Ian's great new game.
All you have to do is run around in circles, sit down on the ground, and see who can bite the backside of their own leg fastest.
It's really fun.
Ian, I'd like to have a word with you.
This one was just okay. It's nice seeing Leonard get some recognition from his peers for once, but nothing really happens in this. Everything moves so slowly, and I don't think Spot's reactions were warranted at all. Season 2, episode 10 is yet another one split in two, with the first segment being titled Party Animal. Tomorrow is Leonard's 10th birthday, which he doesn't feel like celebrating because he gets nervous at parties. But Spot isn't willing to take no for an answer and says, like it or not, he's throwing Leonard a party. So after getting Mary Lou's permission, Spot goes all in on haggling with balloon companies. They try to hide it all from Leonard, who once again says he doesn't want a party, listing all the things that could potentially go wrong. And when Spot tries to convince him otherwise, Leonard sees what's going on and isn't happy about it. That night, Spot has a nightmare in which Leonard's party ends in shambles, allowing him to finally realize what a bad friend he's been.
The party's off. We gotta call everyone and cancel. Where's the list of phone numbers?
Oops. Here's a 4.
Since he already knows about the party, Mr. Jolly teaches him how to act surprised, which after some trial and error, he eventually gets.
That was it! Again! By Jove, I think he's got it.
This is gonna be the greatest birthday ever!
Well, someone changed their tune fast. But it doesn't matter since Spot did what Leonard wanted and cancelled the party, much to his disappointment.
We're gonna have fun though, right? Oh, a nice day with videos, some fried luncheon meat. Boy. Come on, I've got the VCR ready to go.
Happy birthday to me.
Surprise!
I thought you said...
I wanted it to be a real surprise.
And everyone has a great time as none of Leonard's fears come true. I kind of get what they were trying to go for, and there are some nice moments here and there, but it's an episode where Spot blatantly disregards Leonard's feelings about throwing a birthday party until the very last second, that then has Leonard change his mind out of nowhere just so it doesn't make Spot look entirely selfish. I also really have an issue with these episodes of shows that essentially look down on kids who don't do things in a conventional way. What's that? You don't want a huge loud party attended by a bunch of people who don't value you much as a person and would instead prefer a quiet day at home spent with your family doing things you love? Are you even human? Ugh, let's just move on. Episode 10B is Mr. Jolly, Man or Mauser. But before that, in between these episodes is this really weird shortened intro that's just the instrumental. I guess they didn't have enough material for another 11 minutes, so they decided to add this to fill the extra runtime. And there's also an animation error, as at the very end, Spot's shirt is missing its details, and he just has this blank, dead-eyed expression, which the longer I stare at it, the more of my soul it consumes. Oh, right, the episode. Mary Lou discovers a mouse and calls pest control, only to be put on hold while Leonard suggests that Mr. Jolly can handle it.
Our Mr. Jolly? Leonard, honey, your dog will be quoting Shakespeare before that cat ever catches a mouse.
Ah, what fools these mortals be.
Leonard bets Mr. Jolly can catch the mouse before she gets off hold, giving him just 5 minutes. Leonard wakes Jolly up and tells him to catch the mouse, as he affirms he isn't a real cat, just an ooshy, squishy, lovety old ball of fur. But when he learns cookies are on the line, he takes on the task. Then the mouse, who is called
Pogovira, Silvita, Lupita, Evita, Ratoncita,
starts taunting him, and the chase is on, until Margarita runs down the gap between the counter and fridge. Mr. Jolly is about to give up when Spot tells him to use his vibrissa.
I most certainly will not. There are children present.
Vibrissa are your whiskers. You know, cats' whiskers always grow to the exact width of their bodies, thereby providing them with an early warning system so they never go into any spaces in which they might get stuck.
With only a minute left, he squeezes in, but she slips right past him as Spot has to come to the rescue. Mr. Jolly has had enough of the taunts and goes full force, chasing the mouse throughout the entire kitchen, breaking everything in his path. But even then, he can't catch her and runs out of time. His self-esteem is severely depleted as he breaks down. Margarita feels sorry enough for him to come out of hiding and give herself up. Later on, Leonard apologizes for trying to force Jolly to be something he's not.
You know, I'm not. Sometimes it takes the humiliation and utter degradation of trying to be what you aren't in order to appreciate what you really are. I may be an old fur blob, Leonard, but by golly, I'm a fantastic old fur blob.
Good episode. Season 2, Episode 11, What Sweat Got to Do With It, is about the class having to perform at the annual District School Principal Showcase, where they'll have to square dance. Leonard is excited because he might be partnered with Leslie, who, if you remember, is Leonard's crush. And if you don't remember, I can't really blame you because she's been pretty much a background character this season so far.
Not likely. Rules of random selection applied to the frequency interpretation formula vis-a-vis statistical analysis, not to mention your unfailingly bad luck, weigh heavily against it.
But Spot soon rethinks his math and orchestrates everything so Leonard and Leslie get paired up. But when they're about to begin, Leslie runs away in tears, saying she just can't. Leonard looks down and fears it's because of his sweaty palms. Spot gives him some therapy to get to the bottom of the issue and comes to the conclusion that he needs some confidence on the dance floor. But Spot's attempts to teach Leonard only make things worse, so the next day he asks Principal Strickler to be excused. And any goodwill I had for this guy after Strickler's pet is pretty much gone now.
Now get this through your 4th grade video game besotted brain. No one graduates from this school without square dancing! Do I make myself clear?
So Leonard has a nightmare where he almost drowns the entire class, and for a second believes that maybe he dreamt everything, and there is no square dancing.
Rise and shine! Got a great big surprise for my great big square dancing boy!
Hey, maybe this is a hacky, cliched psycho-thriller film, and you'll wake up a second time.
Do-si-do your tush out of the bed!
Nope, it's reality.
So Spot gives Leonard a pep talk in class just before they begin, and when that doesn't work they cover his hands in antiperspirant, and when that doesn't work they try hypnosis. As Spot just takes off his collar in front of everyone because consequences no longer exist in this show apparently. But even that doesn't work, and the dance is tomorrow, so it seems Leonard is doomed. Spot tells him his only option is to tell Leslie the truth, and just before they go out on stage, he's convinced.
Leslie, I have something to tell you.
Leonard, I have something to tell you.
You do?
The reason I never wanted to hold your hands is because I'm embarrassed. I never danced with a boy before and my hands got all sweaty. I thought you would think I was yucky.
And the dance goes well. until Ian takes over the mic. Yeah, remember when Spot manipulated the class to ensure Leonard and Leslie would be paired up? This led to him being paired up with Ruth, much to Ian's anger, so now he takes over the dance, instructing everyone to embarrass Spot as though it was part of the routine, which is how the episode ends. Oh, and the B-plot here is about Mr. Jolly learning he's lactose intolerant because his body started making disgusting noises after he had some milk, meaning he can no longer have any dairy until it turns out he isn't lactose intolerant. Mary Lou just tried to give him soy milk instead. Yeah, not the most multi-layered storyline. Season 2, episode 12 is called Dogfight. Spot and Leonard are challenged to a game of basketball by a pair of 5th graders, and Spot agrees, thinking that if they win, they'll be kings of the playground. And with a slight attitude adjustment, Leonard is in, and the two are actually really good. Oh, they still lose, but only by 1 point, thus earning the respect of the other 4th graders. But then the duo start arguing over whose fault their loss was, and the other kids begin coaxing them to fight.
What? Fight? We're not gonna fight.
Yeah, it's just a stupid basketball game.
Chicken! Yeah, chicken!
I'm not chicken.
Neither am I.
Prove it! Yeah, prove it!
Yeah!
And it seems the peer pressure is enough. But before the fight can begin, Mary Lou comes over and tells them recess is over. So Leonard and Spot think they're safe until the kids begin telling them to fight after school.
Oh gee, after school is not good for me. I'm starting piano lessons.
Yeah, me either. I'm bidding on a thing with a motor on the internet.
Tomorrow!
Don't you people have lives? Meanwhile, Mr. Jolly watches a nature documentary about lions, which then starts ragging on house cats. So he decides to embrace his killer instincts to reclaim his pride. And when Pretty Boy continues insulting him, he vows to have his revenge. Leonard and Spot apologize as Mr. Jolly tells them they have to find a way to not fight. Pretty Boy has an alternative suggestion, introducing them to the world of toxic masculinity by showing them wrestling, and saying that's how real men settle their differences. Though this does give Spot and Leonard the idea that they can simply fake a fight, so they spend the rest of the day training. The next day at school, the two stage a fight with the powers of God and anime on their side. But just when they're about to finish, Leonard is hurt.
Finish him off! Finish him off!
Quiet, can't you see he's hurt? Don't worry, Leonard, it'll go away in a minute. You're probably just dehydrated from all the rehearsing.
So the kids learn they've been bamboozled. But as always, all Spot needs is a passionate and persuasive speech, and suddenly all the kids are pacifists, and the episode ends with Mr. Jolly getting his revenge on Pretty Boy. Great episode. Spot and Leonard's overacting during the fight is easily one of the most entertaining scenes of the series so far, and thus we have arrived at the midway point. Season 2, Episode 11, Taint Valentine's Day. Leonard is writing Leslie a Valentine's Day card, but then signs his own name, forgetting the point of secret admirer.
The eternal Valentine dilemma. Plant clues in case she likes you, but keep them vague enough for credible denial in case she doesn't. Such a slender tightrope St. Valentine has strung.
Leonard's debating skipping Valentine's Day at school because Spot and Tyler will get all the cards and he won't even get one. So Spot, instead of making some for the class, just makes a bunch of cards for Leonard to try and build his confidence. The morning arrives and Leonard has 15 Valentines, the most cards of the class. So now Leonard is actually popular, and nothing could possibly go wrong.
We just counted. There's no way you could have gotten so many Valentines.
You counted?
So because all the cards have the same handwriting, the kids are able to deduce that all the cards were written by one person. So everyone now believes Leonard sent the cards to himself. Later in the day, Spot reveals he wrote the cards, and at lunch the pair tell everyone else, but they all think they're lying. And because Spot was willing to do that for Leonard, he's now the coolest kid in school. Because these hollow balloon animals like when someone is emotionally vulnerable, but not when someone is vulnerable emotionally. The B-plot concerns Pretty Boy having fallen for another bird and trying to write her a note in a very Pretty Boy way. Mr. Jolly, believing that his brash and straightforward approach won't work, takes his card and changes it to be more stereotypically romantic. So Pretty Boy now has a date where all he has to do is be the complete opposite of himself. He accepts Jolly's help, as we have the classic much ado about nothing situation where one friend is secretly telling the other what to say during their date. Returning to school, the kids continue bullying Leonard, choosing a tree over him while picking teams, when suddenly a limo pulls up to the playground. Spot just got back from the FBI lab with enough evidence to clear Leonard's name.
Exhibit A!
a magnified spectrum analysis print showing none of Leonard's fingerprints on any of the Valentine's Day cards, proving without a shadow of a doubt that he could not have written them unless he did so with his feet. Exhibit B, a magnified spectrum analysis print showing none of Leonard's feet.
Spot's last idea is to argue Leonard wasn't intellectually gifted enough to write the cards, as they have perfect grammar and advanced vocabulary. The kids can no longer deny the truth.
Sorry, Leonard. I knew it wasn't you. I didn't believe it anyway.
That's not Leslie's voice. That's Cree Summer, who voices pretty much every other female student because they all have the same voice. Leslie has become so unimportant at this point in the series that rather than get her actual voice actor, they had her be voiced by the same person who does all the incidentals. That's just kind of sad. So Young Hee and the Cree Summer hive mind asked Spot why he did it.
Because I love him. That's right. I love Leonard. He's my best friend.
And now Spot's cooler than ever. Over in the B plot, Pretty Boy's date is going well until Mr. Jolly falls asleep and so he has to fly solo. And of course blows it instantly. Spot and Leonard are walking home as Leonard remarks how today actually wasn't so bad. Because it's not often you get to see how much those around you really love you.
You were right. It doesn't matter how many cards you get. What's important is knowing that the ones you do get are heartfelt. Those 15 you sent meant more than if I would have got 100 anonymous ones.
But then Spot remembers he only sent Leonard 14 Valentines, meaning there's one that was from someone else.
You are the best. Signed, your secret admirer. It's from Leslie. She has a blue pen. I saw it once.
Well, there's lots of blue pens in the world. But it definitely could be from Leslie.
Do you think?
Definitely.
Oh my god, that was actually really sweet. And a little bit tragic, but mostly sweet. And this was a really good episode. I mean, how many Valentine's Day episodes can you think of that focus mainly on the platonic love between friends? Especially those who identify as male. Only other one that comes to mind is, again, SpongeBob. Because the real strength of this series is how much the Helpermans truly love each other. And it's wonderful having an episode that calls attention to that. Even though it did also further lower my opinion of the other kids and desire for nothing more than for middle school to hit them like a bullet train. The show has by this point mostly abandoned its heavy continuity and detailed character arcs. The only real example of that this season being Pretty Boy and Mr. Jolly learning how to use a computer. But I am really hoping we get at least a little more on Young Hee before the show closes out, because that ending showed so much potential for a character who, outside of a short moment in season 1, hasn't received much focus or anything to really make her stand out. But overall, it's such a pleasant episode with a nice ending. The last 13 or so episodes have been a very interesting watch, because in many ways it's exactly the same show as the previous season, but in many others it's something completely different. And in a way you could say it kind of breaks the show. What I'm about to say is going to sound very negative and contradictory to the fact I have called most of the previous 13 episodes good. But this season has some problems that don't harm any single episode, but do start to wane on you over time. And since I've already spent so much time discussing what makes the show work, all I really have left to do now is address its problems. The biggest change going into season 2 was the lack of any large-scale continuity or story arcs. In season 1, each episode felt like they built on each other, giving us some very cathartic moments of the characters growing. Season 2 at this point has had little to none of that. The only real remnants of that aspect of the show was, again, Mr. Jolly and Pretty Boy learning how to use a computer, which happened in episode 2 and then was called back in a few of the following episodes. But while the first half of the season lacks any meaningful ongoing story, there are still some running themes that help connect a handful of episodes to bring at least a little cohesion to these stories. The first, and what I'd argue the main theme of this stretch of episodes, is responsibility. responsibility. In the first 6 or so episodes, both Leonard and Spot are constantly dealing with new responsibilities, which is mostly present in the first 6 or so episodes. From Spot having to look after some eggs, to Leonard lying to his mother on Halloween, to both of them shirking their junior boy ranger community service jobs. Lots of stories are about what it means to be responsible and staying true to your commitments. Then moving into the remaining episodes of this batch, I think there are 2 other overarching themes: animal instincts and the price of popularity. In The Grass Seed is Always Greener, No Substitutions Please, Mr. Jolly Man or Mauser, and Dogfight, we see the Helperman pets grapple with their instincts and natural impulses. Spot can't control himself when he doesn't trust the substitute teacher, Pretty Boy gives into his pre-migrational syndrome and flies 3. Then in 2 episodes, Mr. Jolly has to reconcile with who he is as a cat. As for the cost of popularity, the main episodes focusing on this are Don't It Make My Brown Eyes Green, Dogfight, and Taint Valentine's Day to an extent, as the episode features some moments where Spot is conflicted between helping his friend and the student's admiration of him. And all those responsibilities, animal instincts, and throwing each other under the bus for the sake of validation leads to a much larger dose of arguments and infighting within the family. While the love is still clearly there are many episodes where they are much more hostile towards and constantly at odds with each other. Very early on in the season, I made a joke that all this family does anymore is place bets on each other, because it's honestly hilarious how many episodes include that as a plot point. While that warm, wholesome, found family dynamic from season 1 is still there, it's much more underplayed and not as present. We don't get a lot of stuff like the ending of Being Mrs. Ledready or A Dog for All Seasons or Saving Mr. Jolly. So season 2 tends to lean towards being more mean-spirited and sarcastic, which I think stems primarily from some sort of shift in how the show portrays Spot. Whereas in the first season, his overzealousness and boastful attitude about education was very endearing, season 2 Spot is a lot more selfish and arrogant. While he's still overall a very likable character, the charm and innocence of the first season has mostly worn off, and the cracks in the foundation are starting to show a little more. Things like a majority of the other kids at school having no personality and only existing to bully Leonard and Spot, who is no longer the most popular in class like he was in season 1. Another reason for why the show has seemingly been doused in cynicism is because of how much they have decreased Mary Lou's role. There are a lot of episodes she simply doesn't appear in, and even when she does, it's a very minor appearance where she simply has to follow the role of either teacher or mother. And that's my biggest issue with season 2, because she was my favourite character, especially in the last few episodes of season 1 that really went the extra mile when it came to giving her depth. So to see her role in the show be reduced so heavily here is disappointing to say the least. I'm still having a great time, but as the season marches on, I'm slowly witnessing those sparks that made the show so unique and engaging start to get dimmer. And before we move on to the next half season, there are still a few other things to address regarding the airing of the show and the grouping of its episodes. Season 2 of Teacher's Pet premiered on ABC on September 22nd, 2001, 9 months after the previous season finale. However, things weren't all that sunny for ABC, as Disney's One Saturday Morning block had been seeing a steady decrease in the ratings, causing the whole thing to get stripped back and eventually be taken off the air a year later. Because of this, a handful of shows that were still airing new episodes were moved to other networks, Teacher's Pet included. So starting with season 2 episode 6, the show would rotate on which channel new episodes would premiere on. Taint Valentine's Day was the last episode to air as part of Disney's One Saturday Morning, as the show would then permanently be moved to Toon Disney to air the final episodes. And I said final episodes because by this point, Teacher's Pet had been cancelled by Disney. Now, these factors have led to some people labelling the second half of season 2 that aired on Toon Disney as season 3, giving the show 3 seasons with 13 episodes apiece, which, while I can't deny how satisfying those numbers are, season 2 was produced as one big 26 episode season, and that was very common for Disney back in the day. So now that I've gotten all that cleared up, and hopefully given you all a better understanding of the context going into this final stretch of episodes, let's dig into the second half of season 2. Season 2, episode 14 is called Science Not Fair. The science fair is tomorrow as Leonard's project is about how dogs hear different than people. Andy carries out his experiment by tormenting a bunch of pets with a dog whistle. Spot tells him his experiment is cute but doesn't qualify as true science.
This is science. I observed something and now I'm doing research to discover why.
Spot's project is on photosynthesis, but they have to hide it when Mary Lou enters. She discovers the project and, of course, thinks it's Leonard's. Leonard tries to say he's going in another direction for his project, but Mary Lou doesn't want to hear it.
Okay, I'm gonna tell you the truth, okay? Okay, here it is. The experiment isn't mine. I didn't make it.
Oh, honey, if you didn't make it, who did? The dog?
Yeah?
Spot decides to give Leonard the project so that he can know how it feels to win something for once. Leonard is unsure since he doesn't know anything about photosynthesis, so Spot offers to teach him. But Leonard can't help his anxiety as he struggles with memorizing stuff. And now the episode is about exploring alternate learning methods, which is a lesson I always greatly appreciate. Turns out Leonard's preferred method is the same as mine, as Spot teaches him about photosynthesis in song form.
I can't overemphasize that all these plants of every size, they are smart, they're very wise, they photosynthesize.
Leonard soon understands as he gets his first ever solo line, and damn has this boy got pipes.
There's a lot of energy stored in that ATP, that chemical starts the race. When carbon dioxide's taken for a ride, organic carbon's left in its place.
By George, he's got it!
Our B story in the episode focuses on Mr. Jolly being inspired by Spot's project to cultivate his very own garden in the garage, but is disappointed when Pretty Boy doesn't want to help. Then he gets his revenge when he won't let Pretty Boy have any of the sunflower seeds. The science fair arrives only for it to turn out that everyone did a project on photosynthesis. Still, Strickler tells Leonard he's pretty much already won. The final booth the judges visit is Spot's. They start asking him questions as for once he doesn't have an answer. So Leonard rescues him, in turn winning Spot the crown as he's the only one who carried out an experiment in the field, inadvertently telling Leonard he's a true scientist, a fact he keeps teasing Spot over.
I thought that hurts.
It does, but it blocks out the sound of your voice.
You know why? Because the tympanic membrane inside your ears.
This is the first episode in a show about school to actually teach you something. The photosynthesis song is catchy and memorable to a point where I could legitimately see it helping kids learn about the topic, in a similar way to how, say, Animaniacs uses its songs to educate its audience. And as mentioned, I do love when episodes like this take some time to show how everyone learns in different ways. Season 2, episode 15 is called To Be or Not To Be. We open in the final moments of the school spelling bee as Spot wins by spelling anti-disestablishmentarianism. So Spot will be representing the school in the annual county spelling bee, with the chance to win Fowler D. Roosevelt Elementary School its first ever award. Also, they reference the school for losers, which points on the continuity, but I'm also taking away some points for reminding me that place exists. At home, Mr. Jolly brings in a glockenspiel on wheels.
You said it would be a hot day in December before you'd give me singing lessons. Remember?
Yeah, so what?
Huh? Well, see, I figure if we start today, I could have the tiny flugelhorn girl down pat in time for Christmas.
That'll teach me to make stupid promises without consulting the Farmer's Almanac.
Wait, that's a callback to Season 1, Episode 2. Not even 5 minutes in, and we've already gotten multiple references to Season 1 episodes. I'm keeping my expectations in check, but this may be the start of some sort of course correction. Though this episode takes place in December, and the Thanksgiving episode is after this, but I'll chalk that up to airing order. To learn more about his opponent, Spot and Leonard infiltrate West East Westland Elementary School, which has previously been mentioned in What Sweat Got to Do With It. But don't worry, they're not ditching.
It sure was a lucky coincidence that Principal Strickler decided to give us Fowler D. Roosevelt's birthday off from school this year. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to spy on this Kravitz kid.
The duo spend all day spying on the county spelling bee champion Eric Mark Kravitz, as Leonard makes note of how lonely he is. They follow him home only to get caught. Eric is voiced by Blake Ewing, who also played Menlo in Recess. He definitely has a casting type.
I'd prefer that you just tell me what's going on here.
Yes, of course you would. It's quite simple, really.
Spot lies, saying he and Leonard are doing this because they want to hang out with Eric.
What are your names?
My name's...
His name's Ian Wazalewski, and I'm young He Mandelbaum.
But this backfires as Spot sees the full extent of what he's up against. He decides his only chance is to fully dedicate himself to studying like Eric, but not before destroying the Glockenspiel. Spot spends the next few weeks focused on nothing but spelling. He has a weird dream where he's at the spelling bee, but everyone is a dog, which I guess means we're officially back in Spot having an existential crisis over his double life territory, which I have severely missed. The bee begins, and soon it comes down to between Spot and Eric. But Spot's last word is Glockenspiel, a word he had purposefully erased from his mind earlier. So Eric wins, but everyone is still happy with Spot's second place trophy. He makes up with Eric, and the episode ends with Mr. Jolly and Pretty Boy performing the Tynard Flugelhorn. It's so strange the previous episode gave us Leonard's first big singing part, and this episode is the first time Mr. Jolly has ever sung, almost as if they're trying to prepare us for something. This one felt like an amazing throwback to season 1, with the amount of continuity and little character building moments that didn't need to be here but were a really great touch. Season 2 episode 16 is One Dog's Junk. The Helpermans are having a yard sale, and Leonard accidentally lets Spot's favourite toy get sold. Spot meanwhile goes mad looking for it, as Leonard doesn't want to admit the truth. The reason Spot is so hung up over this is because it was a gift from his first ever Christmas. And as quite possibly the most overly sentimental person you'll ever meet, I definitely relate to Spot in this story. It turns out Ian is the one who bought Spot's toy, thus driving him insane, which then begins affecting his performance in school as he can't concentrate. Again, this almost leads to him outing himself, but this time he can't snap out of it as the other kids laugh at him. So Leonard decides to steal the toy back from Ian. Meanwhile, Pretty Boy and Mr. Jolly decide to make a quick buck by selling their old things online.
Welcome to bidtillyou'rebroke.com, where one man's junk is another man's jewels.
What'd I tell you?
They make a killing by exaggerating the quality of their products. But Mr. Jolly, being the fantastic old fur blob he is, wants to use the money to buy Spot a replacement for his toy. Too bad Pretty Boy has the same idea, as the two end up in a bidding war with each other. Back at school, Spot makes a passionate speech about childhood attachments and how important a simple object can become to someone. Mr. Jolly and Pretty Boy both lose the bid to Ian, and since he now has one in mint condition, he gives the old one to Spot.
I'm sure there's a lesson in there somewhere, but for the life of me, I can't figure it out.
Just keep walking before he changes his mind.
Another great episode. We're on a roll right now. It's another standout example of how much the family cares about each other. Mr. Jolly and Pretty Boy's plot could have easily been about them lying to get people to buy their stuff only to receive their comeuppance, but instead it turns into them trying to do something nice for Spot. It really does feel like the show has returned to form, as this is another that could easily be put in season 1. Only thing that's missing is Nathan Lane, as he hasn't voiced Spot in the previous 2 episodes. Huh. Weird. Season 2, episode 17A is called Team Scott. The Junior Boy Rangers are getting ready for this year's Jamboree, which they always lose. Spot tries to inspire everyone by performing all the tasks perfectly, so they decide to let him win every event. Spot aces everything as the other teams can't even score a single point. Spot gets a bit of an ego, not listening to the instructions for the final event, the team hike. Leonard tries to tell him he's wrong, but he won't hear it. So Spot leads the troop the exact wrong way.
Oh, what have I... Oh, what have I done?
Spot falls as another troop shows up to help him, but since they got help from another troop, they're disqualified. Episode 17B, Take Me Out of the Ball Game, sees the return of Nathan Lane. Spot and Leonard are trying out for the baseball teams. Naturally, all the coaches argue over who gets Spot, while Leonard ends up on the worst team. But there's an issue.
Who would have thought when I first arrived at your school a scant 8 months ago...
8 months? You've only lived in this town for 8 months?
Do you mind? I'm exulting here.
If you want to play in our league, you have to have lived in the district for a full year.
However, there are no rules saying he can't coach Leonard's team. Though, as we all know, Leonard struggles at quickly learning a bunch of new information. The game starts as Spot is parading around telling everyone how great Leonard is, and I can't decide if this is a really supportive and wholesome friend moment, or trying to live your dreams through someone else moment. Too bad Leonard still stinks at the game though. Oh, did I mention this episode has a narrator?
There were no two ways about it. It was time to make a switch. So Scott, he told poor Leonard,
Guess what? You're gonna pitch!
Leonard pulls Spot aside and rightfully yells at him. He did all this for himself because he couldn't play. The two start arguing, though we do get a cute moment when Leonard goes back for his final strike. Spot tells him to do what he's good at and bunt, so he does, thus winning the game for his team as they carry him off into the sunset. Better than Team Scott, but not by much. Again, I just don't think the show works with these 11-minute stories. Season 2, episode 18 is titled Inspector Ledready II. The kids are doing a project on South America, and Leslie's is so obviously the best, causing everyone to get jealous. Leonard's told he'll be presenting after Leslie as Spot encourages him to stop worrying and just try his best.
What's holding up the line? Make way for those thirsting for knowledge. Leonard!
My map!
In Strickler's office, Leonard tells them what happened. He came back to class early to find Leslie's project already broken, so he tried to fix it in order to impress her. Spot vows to prove Leonard's innocence, but he only has until the end of the day to do so. As the entire class begin accusing each other, various secrets of the students are revealed, as for once these kids have some goddamn personality. Chelsea went over to the shelves to sneak in a piece of missing homework. Kelsey came back to the class to leave a love letter in Tyler's desk. Young Hee was seen moving Leslie's project, but this was because her project still needed to dry, so she moved it into the sun. And Ruth moved her project because she didn't want it to be next to Ian's.
No, stop! Don't accuse Ruth. I admit it. It was me! I did it!
So, Ian, you admit you broke Leslie's map?
Nah, I just wanted Leonard to get his hopes up. Everyone knows he did it.
So the entire class's alibis, I guess Tyler, Taylor and Trevor don't count, which leaves only Leonard. Spot questions Leslie as we learn she was at the Helperman's yesterday to borrow some paste, but no one was home. It's all coming together as Spot sends for Strickler.
Leslie's map was broken by no one and everyone.
Excuse me?
Spot uses visual aids and reused animation to explain how this wasn't an act of malice, but rather a chain reaction caused by a series of unfortunate circumstances.
I don't buy it. What kind of a school principal do you think I am?
Elementary, my dear principal. Elementary.
With a photo Mary Lou took earlier, Spot has all the proof he needs to lay this matter to rest, but then stumbles across one final bit of evidence that does point to a single culprit, Principal Strickler, who we saw eating sugar earlier in the episode.
In the words of Scott Locke Holmes, I apologize to everyone and no one.
Apology accepted, Principal Strickler. Right, class?
This was hands down the funniest episode of the show so far. The overly dramatic finger pointing was a joy to watch, and it's nice that the other kids in the class finally have some personality for once. There's no deep character exploration or emotional moments, it's just a really entertaining story. Season 2, episode 19, The Turkey That Came to Dinner, is the Thanksgiving episode. Spot is excited for Thanksgiving because usually Leonard's grandma Rose comes to visit, meaning the pets are kept out in the back because she's allergic. However, this year she's staying home.
Oh, boy, oh, boy, oh, boy, oh, boy, oh, boy.
Oh, Grandma Rose just called from the airport. She missed us too much to not come out for Thanksgiving. Scott, go home. Leonard, clean your room and put the pets out on the back porch right away.
Oh, boy.
Leonard puts them on the back porch as Grandma Rose arrives.
My little Lenny Benny, bright as a penny. Come hug your Grandma Rosie Posey, got your nosy.
No, no, Grandma, please, give it back. My room is clean.
Well, all right.
Oh, it's, Betty White. Okay, You can do this. So because she wants her turkey fresh, she brought a live one with her. As you do. So Mary Lou puts it in the back with the other pets. Once they meet the turkey, whose name is Lurky, they realise they have to save him from his grisly fate. Spot is annoyed at Leonard, who has forgotten about them while playing a video game his grandma gave him. Spot forms a plan to save Lurky.
What are you doing here?
I live here.
Oh, that's cute. Yes, I know you spend a lot of time with us, but shouldn't you be home with your family for Thanksgiving?
You know, Mom was busy with all her preparations, and I was just underfoot. You know how annoying we boys can be. So she sent me out to the 24-hour all-natural food store, and look what I got you. Oh, turkey. 100% soy tofu.
Oh, Scott, you are a lifesaver.
Oh, shucks, ma'am. Just doing my job.
Spot sits quietly on the couch while Leonard and Rose fight over the game.
Sorry to interrupt your fun, but I haven't seen my good friend Leonard for over a couple of minutes. 1,020 minutes over a couple of minutes, to be precise. But who's counting?
Spot then becomes hooked on the game himself, forgetting his mission as Rose learns about the faux turkey. She says if Mary Lou can't prepare the turkey, she'll do it herself. Pretty Boy and Mr. Jolly disguise themselves to save Lurky, which works. Spot suddenly remembers he abandoned the rest of his family, but on the way out, him and Grandma Rose shake hands, meaning she can't be allergic to them. So at dinner they prove it to her, meaning they no longer have to stay on the back porch. With that, they start the blessing. In song form, which is the first time the entire family have got to sing together, and also the first time that Jerry Stiller has sung as Pretty Boy. Meh, it was an alright episode. I mean, there's nothing I hated about it, but it's easily the worst of the Teacher's Pet holiday episodes. Betty White was of course amazing in the guest role, and there were some fun moments, but it's definitely a step down from the quality of the recent episodes. Season 2, episode 20 is Double Dare Dog. Leonard is sick of Leslie always ignoring him, even though she never does. Still, Spot tells him today is the day that he will make her notice him by telling her how he feels.
I can't do that. What if she rejects me?
She probably will, but it'll be good for you. Trust me.
But the playground and cafeteria are strangely abandoned. They find the other kids in the auditorium playing Truth or Dare as they offer for them to join. So Leonard's going to play, but Spot decides to sit out for obvious reasons. Leonard takes the truth as Spot suggests they ask him who his favourite girl in the class is. The bell rings right before Leonard can give his answer.
You're only safe till tomorrow at first recess. We'll expect your answer then.
Yeah, your honest answer.
Hold on, is this going to be a follow-up to Taint Valentine's Day? Oh no. So now the episode is about various characters overcoming their fears. Leonard has two options. He either tells the truth, which he doesn't think will go over too well, or he lies.
My favorite girl in the class is... Younghee.
Oh, Leonard!
But he doesn't know about Young-hee's crush on him, so how... This hurts my brain. Spot comes up with an alternative solution as Leonard opts for a dare instead.
No way!
That is so illegal.
What? No way!
That's Leslie's voice. And Young-hee's voice was coming out of Kelsey. How do you mess up that badly? Strickler shows up with his new toupee that he's wearing to impress another teacher, as the kids know what Leonard's dare is going to be.
We dare you to take Principal Strickler's toupee and then put it on top of the statue in front of the school.
Oh no!
You're gonna get in trouble.
Meanwhile, Mary Lou has gotten Mr. Jolly a...
Super duper, no need for a scooper, automated self-cleaning kitty box. It has a paw pressure sensitive litter separator, instant aromatherapy air freshener, and a digitized voice alert system. Isn't it fabulicious?
And he is mortified because he fears change. Don't we all? So Pretty Boy tries to help Jolly face his fear. Spot and Leonard try to get the toupee but get caught as Spot has to talk their way out of it, tricking Strickler into going to sleep, thus allowing them to swipe his toupee. But they don't put it on the statue in time, and since he failed the dare, Leonard has to tell the truth. Alright, this is it. The moment that has been 33 episodes in the making. Here we go.
My favorite girl in the class is... Leslie.
Well, duh. Tell us something we don't know. Yeah, everyone knows that.
On the walk home, Leonard feels good having faced his fear. He returns home and helps Mr. Jolly face his, as the cat turns out to actually enjoy it. But when he calls the box his new best friend, Pretty Boy can't help but be jealous.
Okay, so I fear expressions of intimacy. What are you staring at?
That was exactly what we needed right now. It's not the funniest episode, it doesn't have the best story, and it has some production problems, but for the first time in a while, it felt important. Things happened to the characters here that mattered. Telling Leslie how he feels is a huge moment for Leonard's character, which is something I haven't been able to say since season 1. This episode feels like the show is starting to wind down a little, in a sense closing a long-running storyline. It's a great time all around, and I really hope they keep this momentum going for the last few episodes. Season 2, episode 21, Attack of the 50-Inch Girl. There's a new student in class, Fred Bitters, played by Nancy Cartwright.
Well, that's a very unusual name for a girl.
And that's a very unusual hat for a freak. So,
Teacher's Pet, your 2002 is showing. She takes an instant disliking to Spot, almost hitting him with a tetherball. Later on, the girls are laughing about something in the bathroom as the boys wonder what it is until Spot suggests they just go in.
Excuse me, are there any girls inside?
no,
Any baths?
no.
Good, then it's just a room, right? I believe I have semantically deconstructed all justification to remain out here any longer. Come on!
Once inside, they find what is so funny.
I'm the teacher's pet. Bow wow.
That's not funny. That's just mean.
And Fred continues bullying Spot throughout the day. On the way home, Leonard suggests getting some ice cream to cheer his best friend up, but Fred's already there. So Spot has the idea to take off his clothes, and Fred just so happens to love dogs, as she gives them both ice cream. The next day, Spot says he isn't going to school, and when Pretty Boy and Jolly question him, he says he's never going back. At school, Fred begins making fun of Spot again as Leonard sticks up for him, thus causing him to once again be ostracized by his peers. So he returns home. Jolly tells Spot he has to stand up for himself as he and Leonard make their way back to school, only to hide when they almost run into Fred. But it's too late as she's already seen Spot's tail.
Hey, fella, you all alone too? I ditched out of class as soon as that bell rang because everyone else was hanging around making their stupid get-well cards for Hat Boy and the teacher's kid. Must be nice to have everyone care if you're sick. Wish I had friends like that.
So she unveils a tragic backstory as Spot and Leonard agree to be her friend, only for her to run off screaming. This is a topic for another day, but I have serious issues with any show that gives a bully some sob story and then has everyone automatically forgive them. No matter how sad their past was, no one is ever required to forgive someone who has purposefully caused them physical and or emotional pain. And still to this day, the only show I've seen treat this topic with the seriousness and honesty it necessitates is Recess. Season 2, episode 22 is titled The Flipper. Leonard is humiliated at school once again as he's not good at a game that involves tossing baseball cards into the middle of a circle. Spot helps Leonard see the best way to throw the card is by not using your thumb, which he does through a fun musical number because how else do you do things? Leonard returns the next day and wows everyone with his card-throwing abilities, receiving the nickname Leonard the Flipper. Strickler arrives and tells them he's the best at throwing cards the school has ever seen, so Spot challenges him to challenge Leonard. If Leonard wins, the kids get an extra 10 minutes of recess for a week, but if he loses, they get double homework all year.
If I lose, the whole school will hate me.
Thanks a lot, Leonard.
Way to go, Leonard.
I am extremely disappointed.
And that's different from now, how exactly? But Spot convinces Leonard and he wins. So for once, the universe doesn't hate Leonard as things are going his way for a change. Until Tyler, Taylor and Trevor say Spot should challenge Leonard. But Leonard's got a bit of an ego now as he coaxes Spot into accepting the challenge. Meanwhile, Mr. Jolly is making these beautiful structures out of cards, only for Pretty Boy to destroy them. Until the cat has had enough and takes action.
I used mostly cards made of heavyweight paper.
How many cards you use?
Oh, gee, I lost count. Why do you ask?
No reason.
I said mostly made of cardboard, didn't I? I didn't mention, I guess, I used an anvil.
Leonard and Spot meet in the park to throw cards. It's an epic battle. Well, maybe not epic, more so amusing, but in the end, Leonard remains victorious. Still, Spot takes him down from his pedestal by saying he can't treat people this way, even though that's all these people have ever done to him, but go off I guess. Leonard gives back all the cards and apologizes, saying all he wanted was to be good at something for once, but he took it too far.
It's true though, he's not, like, the smartest one in class. Yeah, and he never will be the team captain.
I couldn't wait till I at least got out of the park.
Man, do I hate these kids. Fine episode, nothing more to say about it. Season 2, episode 23, The Blight Before Christmas, is our final holiday episode. Alright, you can have a costume change, but that's it. The class are all receiving their secret Santas. Too bad Leonard got Ian. School is out as Spot and Leonard walk home with Spot telling him at least he has Christmas to look forward to since he won't get any toys.
What are you talking about? Mom and I always get you toys for Christmas.
What you and Ma get me are dog toys. A rawhide bone, a new collar, a dish with my name on it, blah, 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 blah.
Well, that's because you're a dog.
They happen upon a missing dog poster before returning home, as Mr. Jolly is excited to learn about this whole Secret Santa thing, deciding that he and Pretty Boy should take part in one. And I can't deny, this is adorable.
Hey, I got me.
And I got me.
Okay, try again. Me again.
Same here.
Spot and Leonard are distracted from their depression by an advertisement for a new game console, the Mach 3 Game Command. Leonard asks Mary Lou if he can have it for Christmas, but she says they'll have to see what Santa thinks. As they're getting ready for bed, Spot complains about how he has to share everything with Leonard, so he decides to go out and find the lost dog from the poster so he can collect the reward and buy some new clothes. The next day, Mary Lou actually gets some screen time. It's a Christmas miracle. She's out buying Leonard's presents, but when she goes to get the Mach 3 Game Command, they're sold out. She gives her phone number to the worker and asks if he'd let her know when more arrives.
Sure, Leslie, you can come over and play with it anytime you want. Me Mach 3 Game Command, Sue Mach 3 Game Command. Tomorrow afternoon would be great. Alrighty then. It's a date. Ciao.
Spot heads out to find the lost dog while Mary Lou goes all over town trying to find the Game Command, both to no avail. Spot eventually tracks down the dog called Moby, only to find he ran away because his girlfriend Charlotte is pregnant, and it looks like Spot will have to deliver. Well, this is not what I was expecting from a Disney show, but okay. Back at the house, Mary Lou tells Leonard she can't find the Game Command anywhere, only to get a call as Mr. Jolly comes in to ask where Spot is.
Spot's outside in this weather?
What weather? Oh my gosh! It's a blizzard! Spot! Hair boy! Spot, are you out there?
Turns out the worker Mary Lou gave her number to just called to say someone returned a Game Command, and if they get there in the next 30 minutes, it's theirs. But Leonard couldn't care less about that and just wants to find Spot as he and Mary Lou rush out of the house. Charlotte has the puppies, but it's getting colder and they'll need to get them someplace warm and fast. So Spot goes out for help. He almost threeses but powers through when he sees his family's car and gives chase. He gets their attention by pulling down some decorations as they reunite. Spot gets Leonard and Mary Lou to follow him as Moby and his family are returned to his owners. Mary Lou refuses the reward, but Spot's found something better.
I work for this toy company, and even though you won't take the reward, I was wondering, young man, would you like one of these?
Christmas morning arrives as Leonard and Spot are out in the yard.
Getting the $500 reward so I could buy my own stuff wasn't important in the grand scheme of things, because as long as I can wake up and play with you, that's the greatest gift I could ever hope to receive.
Me too.
Great episode. It doesn't even come close to A Dog for All Seasons, but it still has that unbeatable Christmas feel and a few interesting plot twists to keep me engaged through the whole thing. We're almost done, so let's look at Season 2, Episode 24, all about eavesdropping, which will unfortunately be the last episode of the series in which Nathan Lane voices Spot. It won't be the last time he plays the character, but there's still a bit of sadness knowing that going in. Leonard is once more complaining about how Leslie doesn't notice him, and for once, that statement is true. You guys really want to do some character assassination this close to the end? Alright, for once, Tyler, Taylor and Trevor actually sympathise with Leonard, as they make fun of the girls being excited for Leslie's slumber party.
I wish Leslie'd invite me to an all-girls slumber party.
What? Huh? An all-girls slumber party? What are you, Helperman? A girl?
Leonard is femme now. Sorry, I don't make the rules, I merely headcanon them. Spot says he knows how they can spy on Leslie's party to learn what girls are really thinking, as he goes up to them.
Did you ever notice that Scott walks kind of funny? Yeah, it's almost like walking upright isn't natural for him. Yeah, what's up with that?
Yeah, what's up with that?
Spot returns saying he got him and Leonard a gig performing magic at Leslie's party, promising to return with extensive knowledge on what 4th grade girls really think. But since these writers have trouble knowing what 4th grade boys really think, I'm not gonna hold my breath.
Oh no, no way, absolutely positively not.
I'm really looking forward to your magic act, Leonard. I hear it's great.
Oh, well, abracadabra.
But first, they have to learn magic. So they get some lessons and supplies from a local magic shop, but their act needs work. The actual performance doesn't go well either, as they're shown up by Young Hee. Leonard decides to cut their losses and leave, as Spot hides them in Leslie's closet despite Leonard's protest. But the girls instantly catch on.
This is wrong. It's eavesdropping.
Hey, if they're willing to talk without making sure we're gone, then it's all right to listen.
Well, let me out.
Wait, Leonard, we're not doing this for me. We're not doing this for you.
We're not?
So they begin faking conversations as Leslie says she likes Leonard. This is going to be another episode where Leonard doesn't do anything wrong and gets punished for it, isn't it? All the girls begin lying, saying a bunch of dumb things that make boys irresistible as Spot eats it all up. Once they head downstairs for cake and ice cream, the pair make their escape, but have to hide when Leslie's mom enters the room and turns on the home security system, thus trapping them inside. So it's back to the closet for the pair of them. Spot has a stroke of pure genius and swipes Leslie's phone, calling her to say this is part of their magic act and the grand finale is going to be them reappearing on the window seat in her bedroom, which they do, only to sit on pizza.
Glad you enjoyed it. Thank you, and good night.
That'll teach him to eavesdrop.
So the next week at school, the guys all show up wearing the things the girls said they liked as they laugh at them. But then Spot turns the whole thing around, making Leonard look like the hero.
Leonard told me it was wrong to hide in the closet and listen, but I didn't believe him. So he went along with what the girls were saying as a lesson on the evils of eavesdropping. That nothing good can come from invading someone else's privacy. And boy, did it work.
Then there's a scene with Strickler at the end. Not important. Good message, standard, not all that interesting episode. Although I did like for once Leonard didn't get punished for something that wasn't his fault. The penultimate episode of the show kicks off with Season 2, Episode 25A, The Nose Knows. While grocery shopping, Mary Lou asks Spot and Leonard to go get some paper towels, as they decide to follow Spot's nose and find them near instantly. Spot remarks on how great a dog's sense of smell is.
We're the elephants of the olfactory world. We never forget a smell.
I don't know where this old factory world is, but being the elephant of anything can't be good.
At home, Leonard gets a can out of the cupboard to feed Spot, but has a little mishap. At school, they're served something different for lunch.
That's, Thursday's surprise.
Thursday's surprise. Government-approved cafeteria food feeds 200. Warning, avoid contact with eyes or skin.
Spot discovers that Thursday Surprise is actually the same thing Leonard fed him earlier, as he loudly proclaims it's dog food. The kids, upon hearing this, start a revolution. The lunch lady is played by April Winchell, and for that reason alone she will now be called Miss Binster. So Miss Binster takes Spot to Strickler's office where he reaffirms what his nose knows.
How do you know it's dog food, Mr. Ledready? Have you ever tasted dog food?
I refuse to answer on the grounds that you might kick me out of school and I'll miss this afternoon's spelling test for which I've already memorized the bonus words.
Spot realizes a way to prove he's right without revealing his secret identity and rushes home to get the trash, only to find it's trash day. But thankfully the evidence falls out, so that scene was entirely pointless. But it doesn't matter since the can was never dog food. Leonard simply fed Spot the wrong can. Spot apologizes, and as punishment he has to consume a bowl of Thursday Surprise for the entire school to see. Boring 11-minute episode, nothing new here. And the final 11-minute episode of the show is Don't Bite the Hound That Feeds You. The class are learning about symbiotic and parasitic relationships. And that night, Spot begins scratching in his sleep. Yep, Spot has fleas. This is our second to last episode, folks. The fleas introduce themselves and offer to be Spot's servants if he allows them to stay, so they can have a symbiotic relationship.
Who wants action and how long this lasts?
I'm in. Me too.
Aw, it's nice to see the family betting on each other one more time. Feels nostalgic at this point. So the fleas can't do anything Spot asks, but try to manipulate him into letting them stay, as we've gone from a symbiotic relationship to a straight up toxic one. Spot can't take it anymore as Mary Lou discovers the fleas and puts him outside.
3 hours and 17 minutes. Pay up, boys!
Spot and the fleas sing a song during which Leonard has the brilliant idea to take the fleas to Ian, and I feel my brain liquefying the longer I watch this one. So they give the fleas to Ian and the worst episode of the entire show is over. I remember when being Mrs. Ledready was the worst this show had to offer. I miss that time. And with that, we have made it to Season 2, Episode 26, the final episode of Teacher's Pet, A Breed Apart. What could have very well been the series finale opens with Pretty Boy flicking through TV channels as Mr. Jolly shows up to watch the East Westland annual dog show. While watching the various breeds on display, Pretty Boy asks Spot what breed he is, but Spot doesn't know. Leonard thinks he's just a mutt, much to his shock and disgust. Spot believes he must be a purebred, and you know what that means, it's time for one final Spot existential crisis. He realizes the dog show has 156 breeds, so all he has to do is go down there and he'll figure out what he is. On the way, they run into Mo and the other dogs from the neighborhood. Wow, we haven't seen them since Season 1. Meanwhile, a mysterious cat shows up at the house, who Mr. Jolly seems to know.
Oh, come now, son. Is that any way to treat your old dad?
Say what?
Oh, okay. Well then, Pretty Boy demands an explanation and we get some Mr. Jolly backstory.
He led Mummy down the path of scandal and shame. Left her with nothing but bittersweet memories and a whole basket full of little puddin' pusses to feed, including me. That's the cat on our windowsill, and he's got some nerve showing his whiskers around here, I tell you. He's a crude, classless, partying, womanizing, carousing...
Whoa, whoa, whoa! I've heard enough. Sounds like my kind of cat.
Pretty Boy and Jolly's dad hit it off, but Jolly refuses to let him in. Leonard and Spot arrive at the dog show as Spot goes through each breed as we get many callbacks to Spot's various escapades. First his passion for theatre, then his detective work, but all seems in vain until he sees a Scottish blue bloodhound. As he celebrates in a song, he begs Leonard to take him to the show floor so he can be with his brethren.
Oh no! I'm a wiener dog!
So Spot isn't a Scottish blue bloodhound as the other dogs attack him, which Jolly sees on TV. The cable cuts out as his dad says he can get it working again, so Jolly relents and allows him into the house. At the show, Spot is cornered as Leonard takes the mic, and for once, it's his passionate and persuasive speech that saves the day.
You just care about their breeding and their purebred papers, how many trophies they win, how they can make you look good. But that's not what makes a dog great. What makes a dog great is how loyal he is. The way he can be your absolute best friend in the world.
Oh, Lenny, you're killing me here.
Mr. Jolly's dad tells him the whole truth. Turns out he was once a member of high society, but was kicked out because he valued one's own character over bloodlines and lineage. Then he leaves, but promises to drop by every once in a while. On the walk home, Spot is still disappointed he's not a purebred, as Leonard finally gets through to him.
You're better than them. You're not just smart like an Australian cattle dog, or brave like a St. Bernard, or a good tracker like a bloodhound. You're brave and smart and a good tracker, and a dozen other things besides. That's why I love mutts. You've got it all.
Still, I think I looked rather dashing in a kilt.
They make it home and find Mr. Jolly and Pretty Boy singing together as night falls, closing out Teacher's Pet, the series. This was a stellar final episode. It features some great character exploration, a few fun callbacks, some great moments for everyone, and a focus on the love the Helpermen share for each other. Had this been the note the franchise went out on, I would not be disappointed. And with that, we have completed Teacher's Pet Season 2. So, was the second part of the season any better than part 1? While the second half of the second season had quite a few duds here and there, the good far outshined them. After the relatively unimpressive first half, these 13 episodes kicked it back into high gear. Almost all the problems I had with this season so far were quickly rectified. The cynical tone had been scaled back, thus allowing Spot's character to shine and not be hindered like it had been in a few Season 2A episodes. Much greater focus was placed back on the characters and showing how much they care for each other. Granted, some things weren't fixed. Mary Lou somehow had an even smaller role than she did in the first half of the season, and with the exception of one episode, the other kids at school were still boring characters with nothing behind the eyes. But the big thing that surprised me was the return to continuity and attention to detail that seemed to evaporate after Season 1. Because of that, things felt like they mattered again. The characters were once more allowed to grow and have these important moments that really do leave an impact. Season 2A was very by the numbers and felt static. Whereas this batch of episodes brought so much life and excitement back into the show, to a point where I do kind of wish there was more. So yeah, that's how the TV series Teacher's Pet ended. However, the story isn't quite over just yet. If you remember at the beginning of the video, ever since they finished the pilot, the crew behind the show began developing a feature film starring the characters, which was set to be the grand finale and close out this story. And despite the show being cancelled due to low ratings, Disney was still supportive of moving forward with the film. But the question is, why? Why this show? It was nowhere near as popular as Recess, it didn't have the same brand recognition as Doug. I mean, a Pepper Ann movie would honestly make more sense. Or maybe it has something to do with how successful the show was in other areas, becoming a critical darling and winning 5 daytime Emmys during its run. Or perhaps they greenlit it because it was doomed to fail, another traditionally animated movie that bombed at the box office, thus providing more reason and incentive for Disney to stop doing 2D theatrical animation. But you know, that's just a theory. For whatever reason, Teacher's Pet was about to become one of the only Disney animated shows up until that point to receive a definitive ending. The conclusion to this story that few people cared about was heading to the big screen. So the film went into full production and was set to be released in September of 2003, before being delayed. The film made its debut on January 16th, 2004, over 600 days after the last episode of the series aired, which was another really weird thing about this movie, as typically whenever Disney made a movie based on a show, they tried to get it out while the show was still running. The only other exception to this was a Goofy movie, which got a pass because it starred one of Disney's most iconic and marketable characters. And needless to say, Spot Helperman is no Goofy. But with all that said, we finally arrived. The strangest movie I ever got attached to as a child, and the reason I wanted to make this video in the first place. Let's take a look at the Disney animated movie that, by all accounts, should not even exist, 2004's Teacher's Pet. The movie opens with a rather familiar tune that I dare not play lest I want the mouse to place a hit on me. But of course, even the Walt Disney Pictures logo was done by Baseman. It's the little things. We zoom out to see Spot watching Pinocchio, as he proclaims he would give anything to be a real boy. The blue fairy reaches out from the screen to grant his heart's desire.
I wish I was a boy. I wish
wish I wasn't. Ow, you're hurting me, dear blue fairy.
I ain't no fairy, and it's time to get up.
After Pretty Boy delivers some exposition for those of us that didn't just waste 2 months obsessing over every minor detail of the series, we learn it's the last day of school, something the show has been building to, as taking away the multiple holiday episodes, throughout the seasons were little checkpoints on how long it's been since the pilot, with the most recent one being from Take Me Out of the Ball Game, where Spot says it's been 8 months since he began attending school. And with the setup complete, our musical adventure can begin.
Pants check, shirt check, tail tucked, eyebrows plucked. Well, here I come!
We start with a new rendition of the show's opening theme, transforming it into this big bombastic ensemble number / counterpoint duet between Spot and Leonard, as now that summer is here, all Leonard wants is to have his dog back. Now, you could see this as a major regression of Leonard's character back to early season 1, but it's mostly in the opening and mainly used to establish some sort of conflict early on.
Spot, you can fake it, but you'll never be a boy.
During the ending of the song, they even throw in a reference to Never Take Candy from a Kindergartner, as she apparently redeveloped her crush on Spot. Class begins as Spot receives his Perfect Attendance Award, even though he missed at least 2 days of school during the show, but I talked enough about that. Mary Lou gets emotional for a moment before asking everyone about their plans for the summer.
I'm going to my Granny Smith's Granny Smith apple farm.
We're skating 24/7. I'm grounded for a week for hacking into Buckingham Palace.
Huh. Since when is Ian some kind of tech whiz? I mean, I'm happy they've finally added something to his character outside of just gross. But where did this come from? After his grounding is over, he's going to visit his Uncle Ivan, who he says does terrifying experiments. Then Strickler arrives and makes an important announcement. And I do love this little callback to the pilot.
Morning, boys and girls. I just wanted to stop in and welcome you to the
4th grade, Principal Strickler.
students of the,
4th grade, Principal Strickler? But soon to be 5th grade!
Mary Lou has been selected as a finalist for the National Excellent American Teacher Award, or NETO for short. I mean, it makes sense considering her great reputation. And the finals are in Florida, so it looks like the family is going on a road trip.
I only have one, little tiny, very simple rule. Absolutely no dogs are allowed in my Winnebago ever. I hate dogs!
And with that scene, we have officially said goodbye to most of the students of Fowler D. Roosevelt Elementary School. Let's just take this moment to remember all the colourful characters we met during our time here. Like, Bald Grey Kid, the one that looks like a potato, and that one, whose name begins with a letter. They will be deeply missed. Leonard finishes packing as he and Spot say goodbye.
Besides, it's only for 2 weeks.
Yeah, in boy time 2 weeks, but everything in dog time is 7 times longer. So for me, it's 14 weeks.
Remember that line. It might be important later. Leonard gets a brief solo about his friendship with Spot called A Boy Needs a Dog, but is cut off by Mary Lou, who drags him away. In the house, Pretty Boy and Jolly are watching TV with the pet sitter. Spot changes the channel to The Barry Anger Show, where the entire premise is they bring out quote-unquote wackos to laugh at. Their guest is someone from Florida who claims they have the power to turn animals into human beings. Spot sees this as the answer to his prayers, especially when he learns the scientist called Dr. Ivan Crank, voiced by Kelsey Grammer, is looking for the perfect animal test subject. Spot tells Jolly and Pretty Boy to cover for him as he sets off for Florida. It takes almost no time for Spot to catch up with the rest of his family, as Leonard gets Mary Lou to pull over at a nearby gas station.
I've got to go powder my nose. Cleanliness is next to godliness, but gas station bathrooms are not.
After a quick death fake out, Spot and Leonard are back together. What was that, like 5 minutes? So Spot puts on his clothes and asks to be taken to Florida, but first he has to convince Mary Lou that his family has to go home due to an emergency.
I'd certainly need to discuss it with your mother first.
You don't make this easy. She'll meet you right over there. She just, has to get dressed.
Thus we have the return of Mrs. Ledready. And it is very important that we acknowledge the writers remembered that episode because of something coming up much later. This time Spot's gone from struggling to juggle 3 parts to effortlessly managing 5, even having to get Leonard in on the ruse. But it all works out as Scott is joining the Helpermans on their trip to Florida.
Come on, everyone, time to waste it. Let's hit the road and sing a song about it.
What is it with this family and singing? I'm starting to feel trapped.
Oh yeah, you're one to talk. Mr. sings a solo every 2 episodes and gives table scraps to the other characters. The next song is called A Whole Bunch of World, as the family lists off all the states, which, thanks to me obsessively learning the songs from this movie, is my main party trick. Not really much to say about this song. It's fun and catchy, but has absolutely nothing to do with the plot and is filler in every sense of the word.
I was sure the map said sunny Florida was around here somewhere. Oh, here it is!
Mary Lou gets the boys set up at the beach before rushing off for the first round of Nito. Leonard is excited for a day at the beach with his dog as Spot finally tells him the real reason he came along. Leonard's response is a very stern no, but eventually he does give in to his dog's begging. Over in East Westland, Mr. Jolly and Pretty Boy catch another episode of the Barry Anger Show that follows up on their interview with Ivan Crank. He is a fraud and a dangerous scientist. His experiments didn't turn animals human, it turned them into mutants. Realizing the obvious danger Spot is in, Pretty Boy proclaims they have to go save him. But traveling to Florida means going outside, which, if you remember, isn't something Mr. Jolly vibes with. He may have gotten over those fears once before, but that was just to go to school, not a life or death cross-country mission.
Come on, dry those whiskers and listen to me!
Our next number is by Pretty Boy, called Small and Mighty. The militaristic ballad is about how so long as they don't give in to their fear, they'll succeed. And after some resistance, Jolly refuses to let his anxiety stop him. The pair get some wild animals to sit in for them before setting off on their grand adventure.
Are we there yet?
Small but mighty. Say it with me, baby!
Leonard and Spot arrive at Dr. Crank's house and cautiously enter, as we see this guy has some issues. But he's had one failed experiment too many and is about to give up as he calls in Dennis and Adele to destroy his life's work.
Don't call it stupid, Daddy. You made us with it.
Where is the glory in that?
And don't call me Daddy.
Spot strikes up a conversation and, after avoiding being murdered, reveals himself to Dr. Crank.
Good Lord, I was totally fooled.
Don't worry, it happens all the time.
And using that big 4th grade brain of his, Spot is able to tell the doctor exactly where he's been going wrong. He's been doing his experiments on insects and reptiles instead of mammals. And I absolutely adore this demented version of When You Wish Upon a Star that plays in the background.
And I shall make you a boy.
Oh, boy! Oh, no! Spot, this is wrong! This is going against nature!
Okay, well that line was clearly a pickup done very late into production. And now it's time for our big villain I Am song called I, Ivan Crank, which is a tango. One thing you can't say about these people is they aren't creative.
Let the Neuro Exchange Animal Transformation Operation, or NETO for short, not to be confused with that stupid teacher award, begin!
Things get underway as we're taken on a real trip through Spot's brain, as in the background we see the title card from Costume Pity Party. Creative way to cut corners. The operation seems to be a success as the bandages are removed.
I'm a boy! I'm a boy! I'm a really big boy!
Remember that line about dog time from earlier? Well, it's come back to bite him, as now the movie is a be careful what you wished for story. Ivan tells Scott he will spend the rest of his life travelling the world with him as proof that he isn't a wacko, but the dogman politely declines.
I live with this guy. Although now that I'm a big grown man with knuckle hair and lower back pain, that may present a slight problem.
So Leonard and Spot are sealed in. They try and find a way out, only to hear someone approaching.
Hi, Uncle Ivan! The bus from East Westland I was a little late, but here I am.
Ian?
Oh goody, it's Ian. That's what the movie was missing. The man offers him an old dog chew toy in exchange for helping them escape, which I guess is a reference to One Dog's junk? Oh, this is why Ian is suddenly a computer genius. Meanwhile, Pretty Boy and Mr. Jolly are still on the first leg of their journey, as Jolly is actually starting to enjoy the outside, until they hitch a ride on a train. Scott and Leonard make their way through the streets exhausted and covered in mud.
And if these pants ride up anymore, I'm gonna be a soprano. I gotta get me some new clothes.
They find a missing dog flyer with a reward of $100. And I can't tell if this is an intentional callback to The Blight Before Christmas, or the writers accidentally reusing that idea. Scott says they'll find the dog by using the Twilight Bar.
Oh, we gotta start renting you some more classic animated movies.
Yeah, I think I'm starting to piece together why I used to love this movie so much. Scott uses what little dog he has left in him to get the message out, and soon the dog is returned to their owner.
Turns out she wasn't really lost. She was just kind of busy. Mom!
Oh, puppies!
Again, don't know if this is a reference or laziness. Because they brought back 5 dogs, they get $500. Okay, now I'm definitely counting it as a reference. Via montage, Leonard and Scott have an evening on the town, buying Scott a new suit and renting a sports car. Scene with Ivan, Ian is annoying, Dennis and Adele get a brief moment of backstory and character exploration, moving on. Scott and Leonard arrive at the trailer park just a minute before their curfew.
Let's go!
Wait! I forgot one really important thing!
What?
Who are you, sir?
That.
Oh, yeah.
He tells Mary Lou that he's another finalist in the Teacher of the Year competition, and also that student Scott's family called and it turns out he had to go home after all.
Well, any friend of the Ledreddies is a friend of mine. I'm Mary Lou.
And I'm Scott.
Just like Scott Ledreddy.
Oh, but I'm Scott,
Manley.
Manning. It's hyphenate. Scott Manly Manning.
I love the little detail on how that isn't just a name they think of right there and then, as that was the name of the place Scott got his suit in the montage. Mary Lou invites him in for coffee, and I'm just going to tell you now, things are about to get weird. Even as a kid, this part of the movie completely lost me. Leonard tries to get Scott to leave before anything accidentally slips out, but Mary Lou isn't a fan of his new attitude.
Now, you go straight to your curtained off section of the Winnebago until you're ready to rejoin polite society for dinner. Speaking of dinner, are you hungry?
Thus, Mary Lou and Scott have a candlelit dinner for 2, as something is very clearly going on. Very wrong things. But Scott is distracted because obviously he's never had chocolate before.
I don't know why, but it's as if I've known you for a very long time. You're just so comfy to be with, like an old shoe. Oh, I mean that in a good way.
Mary Lou wishes she had someone like him back home, giving him an idea. As he rushes to tell Leonard he has the answer to their problems and a way for them to stay together. Leonard starts to connect the dots.
Oh no!
Oh, yes! She likes me. I've always loved her. You and I still get to be together. Climb up on my lap, sonny boy. And call me Daddy.
So remember back during the diner scene when I said it was very important to keep in mind the writers remembered the episode being Mrs. Ledreddy? Well, that's because of this. Scott, I know you're not thinking through your actions right now, but that is your mother. Mary Lou is your adopted mother. You are her son. There was an entire episode about you learning this. This is wrong on every single kind of level imaginable. It's always been weird that the girls in class had a crush on Spot, regardless of the fact they think he's a boy. I haven't pointed that out until now because I was waiting for this moment to lay it all out. Teacher's Pet at its core is a very wholesome found family dynamic with fun characters and sharp, witty writing. But there is so much questionable stuff in this show, which at times got very uncomfortable and was only made worse with this context. All About Eavesdropping has a very different connotation once you know Spot is in essence a middle-aged man hiding in a 10-year-old girl's closet. I don't think these were the intentions of the writers, but in retrospect, this kind of ruins quite a few episodes of the show. I've been writing and talking about the series with the mindset of having not seen the movie, because I wanted to try and look at it through the eyes of someone watching the show as it aired. But every time something like this happened, it felt so gross because I couldn't get that image of Scott Manly Manning out of my head. And this is the apex of all of that because, and I cannot stress this point enough, Spot wants to marry his mother. And I'm not the only one disgusted by that concept, as Leonard is rightfully pissed. And we're about approaching the end of Act 2 of an animated movie from the early 2000s, so you know what that means.
So maybe you just better leave me and my mom alone!
You want me to go?
Thankfully, we're saved from the downward spiral by hands down the best song of the movie, I'm Moving On. This stunning classical show tune styled number with these layered harmonies, creative visuals, and this beautiful sense of momentum. The entire cast completely knocks it out of the park with their vocals. Of course, Nathan Lane is phenomenal as always, but major props to Deborah Jo Rupp, who for the first time is allowed to sing with her own voice.
Like a dream, he was here, now he's gone. He drank my coffee, ate my candy. Dreaming I could stand by my manly manning man. I thought everything was fine and dandy. Why did he go?
I'm not joking when I say this is one of my favourite songs from any Disney movie. I have only one very minor complaint that holds it back from being perfect. At the end, they do the classic split screen with every single character, but aside from Scott, Mary Lou, Leonard, Ivan, Pretty Boy, Jolly, Dennis and Adele, every other character is just a poorly looped clip from earlier in the film. They don't even try and make their lips match, they just play a bunch of random gifs during the big emotional number. But aside from that, it's truly an amazing piece of music and undisputed highlight of the franchise.
I'm moving on.
Strange.
Mr. Jolly and Pretty Boy have somehow ended up in Cuba, and Paul went out for the last Disney animated movie to feature a cigarette. Truly, the end of an era. Spot walks along the beach where he sees a boy playing with his dog and starts to understand everything he's given up. Mary Lou has bounced back quickly as she's about to head off for the NITO award ceremony.
I know you miss your dog and your best friend, but we're going home tomorrow, and Spot and Scott will be there waiting for you, and everything's gonna be peachy pie normal and just the way it was.
Mr. Jolly and Pretty Boy finally make it to Florida and see Mary Lou leaving the trailer park. Leonard sulks to himself about everything, and I don't have much to add, I just want you to look at this gorgeous character animation.
Spot! Oh, it's you.
We traveled 2,000 miles and all we get is Owen's fuel!
After a loving reunion, Leonard sits them down to tell them what's happened. Meanwhile, Scott is staying in a cheap hotel as he comes to realise that his dream isn't all it's cracked up to be. He hears someone playing the tune of the song that Leonard sung earlier as we begin A Boy Needs a Dog reprise. It's a soulful lament as Scott wishes he could go back and undo everything from the past few days. Then during the musical interlude, we see a bunch of frames from the series, and I won't lie, I did start to get a bit emotional here, especially since we're almost at the end. This is it. In less than 10 minutes, I'll be done with Teacher's Pet. When we return to Scott, Leonard joins in as the song becomes a duet. Meanwhile, Leonard comes to his own conclusion, that the only way for him and his best friend to be together is to turn himself into a dog. So now Scott wants to be a dog again, and so does Leonard. In a way, it's kind of neat how the show's entire dynamic has essentially been flipped for what will be its final moments. And can we just take a moment to appreciate Sean Fleming's voice in this movie?
I can't go on with just half of my heart.
Nothing and no one can keep us apart.
Again, the songs in this movie are way better than they have any right to be. Scott arrives back at the trailer park, but he's too late, as Pretty Boy and Jolly tell him what he's just missed.
That crazy kid. Although I guess it could work.
No! Now what am I saying? I'm gonna save my boy!
Leonard is already tied up in Crank's lab, as the madman plans to use the boy-turned-dog as bait to catch the dog-turned-man so he can have both. Scott, Pretty Boy and Jolly show up to save him, only to get caught.
I'm sorry, Scott. I just want us to be together again. I did it for us.
No, I'm the sorry one, Leonard. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have messed with nature.
The trio get 3 as Scott rushes to Leonard while Ivan starts the beam. Scott jumps on as the gizmo goes haywire, firing all over the place. However, in a great use of Chekhov's gun, Spot uses the nickel Ivan gave him earlier to jam the machine, zapping Dr. Crank and turning him into a mouse, as Mr. Jolly gives chase, throwing in one last episode reference.
To quote the immortal Bond, all's well.
The laser's gonna blow as Spot gets Leonard 3 before stepping into the line of fire, saying it's his only chance. Scott gets blasted as everything goes completely bonkers and the machine explodes, leaving behind only smoke. I know movies with fake-out deaths are often the subject of ridicule, but how many kids' films go so far as to show the main character's ashes? This movie ain't playing around.
Stupid science!
Wake up. Is that you? Dear Blue Fairy?
How many times I gotta tell you, dog breath, I ain't no fairy!
So Spot is back and the Helperman family is whole once again. We kick off the finale number Proud to be a Dog, a counterpoint to I Wanna Be a Boy, as Spot has learned to accept and love who he is. Thus ending Disney's Teacher's Pet by Gary Baseman. And to close us out, we have a song sung by Kim Possible herself, Krista Carson Romano, called, well, Teacher's Pet. A cover of a song from 1956 with slightly modified lyrics that doesn't stop it from literally being about a student falling in love with their teacher, which is strangely thematically relevant and again makes me question why Disney greenlit this film in the first place. But over that song are a bunch of pictures of the family enjoying their road trip, ending with them arriving back home in East Westland. Oh, and there are 2 deleted scenes only available on the DVD. The first is a short travel montage that expands on Mr. Jolly and Pretty Boy's journey to Florida, which was either cut due to time constraints or the more dire imagery. And the other deleted scene shows the pets celebrating Mary Lou winning the NITO award, only for Pretty Boy to point out they have to find some way to get home before their mom.
I got it all worked out.
Oh, Scott, I'm so glad your family emergency cleared up so you could drive home from Florida with us.
I wouldn't miss it for the world, Mrs. H. Let's go.
When we get home, I'm gonna give that dog such a peck on the...
What a fun yet weird ride revisiting this film so many years later was. But before we get into that, let's answer the main point of the video and why I did all this to begin with. How did watching the show prior to it affect my enjoyment? Well, that's complicated. Because in certain aspect it heightened the experience, with how many clever but not at all intrusive callbacks they did to various episodes, really tying in this idea that the franchise tells a complete story. After watching these characters grow and develop over 33 episodes, I felt more attached and invested in how they decided to send them off. And it is, for the most part, a satisfying conclusion. The one thing I felt was missing is there should have been a moment where either Mary Lou learns the truth about Scott, or they reveal she knew all along. It was something that had been effectively built up over the show's run with numerous jokes about her almost catching on, and someone could look at a few key moments in the film and interpret that she knows. And the thing is, I think they do tell her afterwards, because we see the entire family in photos of the road trip. and the deleted scene is not canon. Granted, including that would require some rewrites to tone down the weirdness of that scene, but I feel it was the one piece missing that would have really elevated this as a finale. I also think Spot's conclusion needed a tiny bit more clarity. It's unclear whether or not this means he's officially done being a part-time boy and won't be returning to school when summer's over, which brings up some questions like, how are they going to explain Scott vanishing off the face of the earth? Part of me kind of hopes Spot does continue going to school, because if he does really go back to just being a regular dog who can quote Shakespeare, doesn't that kind of make the previous 33 episodes entirely pointless? I do think the ending holds up together overall, but there are just these little threads I can't help but pull at. However, watching the show did also have negative effects, as moments I had always felt weird about were made even worse. Spot trying to date his mom is something I will never get over, and while there was some good continuity, whenever there was an inconsistency between the film and the show, it stuck out like a sore thumb. Though overall, I do feel this sense of accomplishment and gratification that knowing after all these years, I got to watch the whole thing. As for watching the movie this time, I did start out from quite a cynical place, wanting to coldly analyse it as both a film and finale to the series. But the deeper I got into it, the more enraptured I became, as it just felt so pleasant seeing this film again and hearing these phenomenal songs. Following my rant about Spot and Mary Lou, I found myself completely engrossed and emotionally invested, as though I'd been transported right back to being 12 years old. Regardless of the inconsistent visuals and overall lack of polish in a few areas, I still find this film incredibly entertaining and at times even moving. It's a good movie with an amazing cast, unbelievably great music, and the same writing that made the show so enjoyable. Wow. Here we are. End of the road. Part of me kind of wants to keep talking forever because then I don't have to accept it's over. I did exactly what I wanted to do 12 years ago. I watched all of Teacher's Pet. While the show has its problems, inconsistent animation, bland side characters, and a handful of episodes that really aren't worth your time, I still find myself completely in love with it and highly recommending it. It's gotten a bad reputation over the years for being boring and safe, which is a fair opinion to have. However, I feel if you try and look a bit closer, you'll find something heartfelt, likeable, and intelligent. Whether it's a short-lived animated series or a movie that defies all logic and is way better than it ever should have been. Heck, I love this franchise so much, a few days ago I bought the official songbook from the movie, which has the original unaltered lyrics to the song Teacher's Pet. That's right folks, I now own a Disney songbook containing the lyrics, "I wanna learn, all your lips can teach me. One kiss will do at the start. I'm sure, with a little homework, I'll graduate to your heart." Yeah, of all the purchasing decisions I've ever made, definitely one of the more questionable ones. Before we move on to the outro, there's something I gotta say. If you're watching my channel, there's a high chance that, like me, you have a deep appreciation for animation as a medium for storytelling. Well, right now in the States, many of the artists who make these shows are fighting to be paid the same amount as their live-action counterparts. In the description and comment section down below, you'll find a link to a petition by the Animation Guild for you to sign and share. Also, if you're going to be tweeting in the near future, be sure to use the hashtag #NewDealForAnimation. Multiple times over, animation has proven itself to be the heart and soul of the entertainment industry, and it's about time that we ensure the people who make our favourite shows and movies are given a livable wage. If you happen to be new around here, feel free to subscribe and comment down below as it helps me out a whole lot. Also, liking the video wouldn't hurt either. And as always, a huge massive thank you to the wonderful, beautiful souls Charles Dugan, Caleb Abington, The Wacky Deli and Juan C for supporting it over on Patreon. If you want to support the future of this channel and me as a creator, you can do so by heading over and becoming a member of my Patreon, which will be linked in the description and comments down below. But of course, it's entirely optional, and I greatly appreciate every single person who watches and enjoys my content. Thanks so much for watching, folks, and I'll see ya real soon.